Everyone knows the story of Noah's Ark, but what no one talks about is what happened after the flood. 3 sons, a silent earth. No nations, no borders, just endless land waiting to be claimed. Who were Shem, Ham, and Japheth? Where did they go? And how did their bloodlines shape the world as we know it? This is the forgotten chapter of Genesis, a tale that echoes across empires, races, and religions, and might just explain where you come from. From the Tower of Babel to the curse of Canaan, from the birth of nations to scandals that still echo across millennia, this is the complete story of what really happened after the flood. But before we dive in, if you're new to this channel and this kind of content helps you unwind, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. Also, tell us, where are you watching from? What time is it right now? We're building a global community here. So without further ado, let's begin, shall we? The last drops fall like tears from heaven, each one heavy with the memory of a world that once was. The storm clouds, dark and swollen from 40 days and 40 nights of fury, begin to part. Silence settles over the endless waters, not the peaceful kind, not the soft stillness of a morning lake, but a vast and hollow silence, the kind that follows the end of all things. Noah stands at the window of the ark. His hands, weathered, rough, grip the timber frame. The man who once walked with God now looks out upon a world remade by divine wrath. Water stretches across every horizon. No mountains, no trees, no birds singing in the morning light. Only water, dark, still, and deep as death. Behind him, the ark groans and sways. Wood on water, a vessel carrying the last breath of the old world. Inside, the sound of life stirs, bleating sheep, lowing cattle, wings fluttering in shadowed beams, paws patting down corridors of wood and straw. Life continues here, in this floating sanctuary. But outside lies the grave of creation. His 3 sons move with quiet purpose. Each step, each task, a silent prayer of survival. Shem tends the birds above. Gentle hands brush each nest, each perch. There's a reverence in him, a care that reaches deeper than duty. He speaks softly to the creatures, as though they too carry the weight of what has been lost. Ham works with the larger beasts on the middle deck. His movements are fast, sure, practiced. He's always been the bold one. Act first, think later. But even Ham, today, moves slower. The water quiets him. His eyes drift off into the windows. He sees what they all see, and he understands. Japheth, the youngest, tends the supplies. Quiet, efficient, ever the observer. While Shem prays and Ham acts, Japheth watches and remembers. He counts the grain, measures the water, trims the lamps. Someone has to track what remains. Their wives drift like shadows in the corridors. Silent, steady, woven into the vessel's rhythm. Noah's wife, mother of all who will come, moves with the grace of one who has witnessed the end of an age. The younger women follow her, wordless, deliberate. Because really, what words could possibly hold the weight of this moment? Outside, the waters begin their slow retreat. God has remembered. His covenant still stands. The fountains of the deep are sealed. The windows of heaven are closed. But the world they knew, every city, every garden, every friend, every face, has vanished beneath the waves. Noah remembers the weight of that sound, the deep, final thud of the great door closing behind them. It echoes in his memory like thunder in a cave. It wasn't just any door. It was the hand of God himself that sealed them inside. That moment marked the end of the old world. It was months ago now, before the first relentless drops fell, before the rains became an ocean, before the waters drowned even the highest hilltops, before the screaming began, and more painfully, before it stopped. Noah tries not to remember the screaming. The ark was never designed for comfort. It was not a haven. It was a vessel of salvation, built for endurance, not ease. Every inch of its hollowed belly carried purpose. Food carefully stored in one corner, fresh water in another. The animals arranged in sections according to their kind and character. Nothing was random. Noah had obeyed down to the last cubit. Every measurement, every beam, every joint, every seam sealed with pitch exactly as God instructed. And yet now, as the silence stretches and expands, the ark feels transformed. It doesn't feel like a boat anymore. It feels like a tomb for everything that came before, and perhaps a womb for whatever is to come. They drift now in limbo, suspended between what once was and what is not yet. One evening, Shem walks quietly to his father. His voice barely rises above the creak of wood. "The raven," he says. "Should we send it?" Noah meets his son's eyes and nods. The raven has been restless, agitated for days now. It feels the shift in the air. Ravens always sense such things. They are clever like that. They smell death. But they also smell what death leaves behind: opportunity. Shem holds out his arm, and the raven launches into the air, wings slicing through the narrow window. It vanishes into the light. It will not return. It is a scavenger. There will be much for it to find. 7 days pass. Then they release a dove. It returns with nothing. The floodwaters still shroud everything. No resting place. No green. No sign of life. Only water. 7 more days pass in patience and prayer. The dove is sent again. This time, it comes back, with something miraculous clutched in its beak. A single olive leaf. Fresh. Green. Tender. Hope. Ham laughs when he sees it, and it's the first true sound of joy that's passed anyone's lips in months. Life, he breathes. Something survived. But Japheth stands silent. He looks at the leaf with furrowed brow. Just one tree, he murmurs, almost to himself. In all that water, only one. 7 more days go by. The dove is sent once more. This time, it does not return. Like the raven, it has found a world it can live in. A world beyond the ark. Noah feels it before he sees it, the subtle, shifting weight beneath their feet. The ark settles. A scraping vibration runs through the hull. Wood groans softly against stone. After so long drifting aimlessly over an endless sea, they have come to rest. They've made landfall. The mountains of Ararat cradle the ark like cupped hands. Slowly, the family gathers at the windows. Below, the waters continue to fall, drawing back to reveal peaks rising like jagged islands in a shrinking ocean. And as they look upon the world that lies ahead, each son sees something different. Shem sees sacred ground, a place where worship will rise like incense. Ham sees untouched territory, land to tame, soil to claim, kingdoms to build. Japheth sees shadows and riddles, questions to ask, secrets to uncover. But Noah, he sees something deeper. Woven into the landscape is both judgment and mercy. God has kept his word. 8 souls have survived the flood, yet the weight of being the only ones left is almost too much to bear. It presses on Noah's chest like the waters once pressed upon the earth itself. Soon, they will step outside. Soon, they will walk upon dry land. They will begin again. But tonight they remain adrift, suspended between the death of the old and the birth of the new. Still the last family alive, floating over the silent grave of everyone they ever knew. The rain has stopped, but in truth, the storm is just beginning. Because within the hearts of these 3 sons lie the seeds of everything to come. Every tribe, every tongue, every kingdom that will rise, every war that will rage, every empire that will build itself up and crumble into dust, every blessing and every curse that will echo through the corridors of history. They do not know it yet. Right now, they are still just 3 brothers, still feeding the animals, still counting the days, still obeying their father's quiet commands. But tomorrow they will become more. They will become the fathers of all who follow. 3 sons, 3 futures. As night deepens, they sit in silence by the glow of flickering oil lamps. The ark creaks less now. The waves have calmed. Beneath the massive hull, there is the faintest sensation of stillness. They are no longer floating. They are resting, waiting. Noah looks at each of his sons. In their faces, he tries to read the story of what's to come. Not like words carved in stone, more like shapes in fog, impressions, shadows. Shem, the eldest, holds his hands a certain way when he prays. There's gravity in his silence. Even as a child, he had a reverent heart, asking questions about God, sacrifice, and meaning. He watched Noah build the ark with eyes full of awe and discipline. When Noah lifted the first tools, Shem was already by his side, ready to labor. Now, as they prepare to inherit a world made clean, Shem speaks of altars and thanksgiving. The first thing we do, he says, with quiet certainty, is build an altar. We must thank God for his mercy. His words carry weight, not because of age or birthright, but because there's something anchored in him, something settled. His wife sits nearby. She doesn't speak, but her eyes say everything. She trusts him. There's wisdom in him, deep, unshaken, and calm. Beside him, Ham shifts. He cannot keep still. Where Shem is grounded, Ham is restless. Where Shem turns inward, toward soul and God, Ham looks outward. Toward land, toward conquest. His fingers tap the wood. His body leans forward. He's always ready to act, to build, to shape things into what he wants them to be. Yes, Ham agrees. An altar. But after that, we spread out. Claim it all. There's no one else out there. It's ours. His voice carries a fire, not of anger, but of ambition. Hunger, not the kind that food can soothe. They have enough grain and dried meat to last for weeks. This is a deeper hunger. He wants more than to survive. He wants to thrive, multiply, build cities, lay foundations for power. His wife says nothing, but the way her hand grips her own wrist speaks louder than words. She knows that hunger, and she fears where it might lead. Japheth says little, as always, but his quiet carries its own weight. The youngest of the three, Japheth has always been the listener, the thinker. While Shem prayed and Ham plotted, Japheth observed. He sees things others overlook. He hears the silence between the words. When their father taught them to read the stars, it was Japheth who memorized every constellation. When Noah showed them carpentry and metallurgy, it was Japheth who found ways to refine the process. Not to boast, but because he couldn't ignore a better solution. Now, as the ark prepares to open, Japheth asks what no one else has. What if we're not alone? He wonders, voice soft. What if others survived? In other ways, in other places? Noah shakes his head. God said 8 souls. Only 8. But Japheth keeps thinking. Then we're it. The only humans for thousands of miles. How do we fill such vastness? The question lingers in the lantern-lit air. They had spent so much energy surviving the storm, they had not yet truly considered what comes next. These 3 brothers will become the root of nations. Their children will cross rivers and deserts, build languages, birth legends. It is a weight beyond imagination, and each son will carry it differently. Shem will walk carefully, reverently, always looking for divine guidance, always building with one eye on heaven. Shem's descendants will carry the weight of memory, guardians of sacred tradition, stewards of righteousness. They'll be the ones to preserve what matters most, the stories passed down through generations, the divine laws etched not only in tablets but in living practice. They will remember. Ham, in contrast, will move with speed and certainty. He'll build with boldness, seizing every open horizon with both hands. His children will be pioneers, explorers who chase the edge of every map and cross every forbidden border. They will break boundaries as easily as others build them. Power will surge through their veins like a wild river, sometimes nourishing growth and vision, other times unleashing destruction in its path. They will leave monuments behind, and scars too. Japheth, ever thoughtful, will build widely and carefully, always asking, what lies beyond? What might be different? Why not this way instead of that? His children will wander far and adapt fast. They'll become thinkers, dreamers, inventors. They'll reshape the world with ideas as much as tools. They'll find ways to survive in places others would never dare to live. But tonight, there's still just 3 brothers in a wooden vessel afloat. They have no idea yet of the curse that will eventually divide them. No knowledge of the cities their descendants will one day build, or the wars their grandchildren will wage in pursuit of land, pride, or survival. They do not yet realize that their names will reverberate through the corridors of history, whispered in tongues they've never heard, etched into timelines not yet begun. Tonight, they are still united, bound not by destiny or legend, but by the simple miracle of shared survival, by the daily rhythms of tending animals, repairing tools, counting days. They eat together. They share stories. They laugh, sometimes. They comfort each other in the strange, silent nights filled with creaking wood and dreams too heavy to speak aloud. Noah watches his sons and feels 2 opposing truths rise inside him, pride and sorrow. Pride, because he sees the strength in them, each unique, each capable in his own way. And sorrow, because he knows what's coming, not just the burden of rebuilding, but the cracks already beginning to show. Because brothers do not always remain brothers forever. Not when the future of the entire world rests on their shoulders. Already, small fractures show their edges. Ham grows irritated by Shem's slow deliberateness. Shem feels concern at Ham's impulsive hunger. And Japheth? He floats between them. He understands both perspectives, feels the pull of each, but fits cleanly into neither. And their wives, though careful, have started to take subtle positions. Not openly, not with words, but in the quiet gestures. Who they sit beside, whose counsel they quietly seek, which child they gently favor during play. Even the animals notice. The peace that once held predator and prey in delicate suspension begins to fray. Creatures that once slept beside each other now hold wary gazes. The tension is growing, just beneath the surface. The ark was a temporary peace, a pause button on nature's violence. But that peace will not last. Soon, order will return to its primal form. And for now, just for these final moments between the old world and the new one, The three sons of Noah sit in the gentle glow of flickering lamps. Tomorrow, they'll open the great door. Tomorrow, their feet will touch the ground, and the long, slow work of rebuilding a civilization will begin. But tonight, they are still one family, still joined by hope, by purpose, by a fragile, unspoken unity, still unaware of the deep divides that time will carve into their bloodlines. This is the last quiet breath before history takes hold and shakes the world. Then it happens. A mountaintop landing. The great door groans as it opens, hinges grinding after months of salt and rust. Light bursts through the opening, not the dull, filtered glow they've known for so long, but raw, brilliant sunlight pouring straight from the sky. After so many months inside the wooden womb of the ark, the brightness feels harsh, unfamiliar, almost alien. Noah steps forward first. His foot touches stone, real stone, cold, unmoving, real. Behind him, his family hesitates at the threshold. For all their longing, for all their talk, when the moment finally arrives, there is fear. The air carries a different scent. Clean, but hollow. No sweetness of blossoms. No smoke from hearths. No distant, comforting trace of other people somewhere out there. Just the sterile scent of rock and damp earth. They stand atop Mount Ararat, overlooking a world that no longer resembles what they left behind. The valleys below, once filled with life and light, are now darkened by mud and silence. Rivers have carved new shapes. Lakes have claimed what once were hills. All the familiar landmarks are gone. Shem kneels. He places his hand reverently upon the earth. "Thank you," he whispers, not to the others, but to the one who guided them here. Gratitude courses through him like breath, not just for survival, but for this, solid ground, warm sunlight, and the chance to begin again. Ham walks forward too, his movement swift, driven. He needs to do something to prove to himself that this is real, that they made it, that life will continue. But even he slows as he takes in the ruins of the world. Peaks rising from the muck like broken teeth. No trees, no green, no sign of life beyond what stepped off the ark. Japheth moves to the edge. He looks out further than the others, his eyes catching details others miss. In the distance, strange shapes in the softened land. Mounds where buildings once stood. Skeletons of cities. The scattered bones of a forgotten world. "It's all gone," he says softly. It isn't a question, just a truth. Their wives follow behind them. Slower, more cautious. Noah's wife, always the strong one, sets her jaw and begins the work. She's led quietly through crisis before. She'll do it again. But even she pauses when she sees what lies ahead. Not just a new beginning, but a beginning from absolute emptiness. No ruins, no walls, no tools left behind. Only blank land stretching in every direction. The animals begin their exodus. Some rush out in a blur of hooves and claws, frantic for freedom after months of captivity. Others step slowly, testing each movement. Predators' eyes sharpen again. Prey become alert. The unnatural balance of the ark dissolves in minutes. 2 wolves vanish down the slope in perfect silence. 2 ravens arc overhead, black wings slicing through the sunlit sky. A family of deer picks their way across jagged stone, sniffing for any green shoot or soft patch of ground. Noah watches them go with a heavy heart. There is relief, yes, that the animals are free, doing what they were made to do. But there's also a strange sadness. On the ark, they were a strange kind of family, bound together by fate. Now, that bond unravels. The unity is gone. His sons begin the work of unloading tools, seeds, bundles wrapped in fabric, jars of precious metal and supplies preserved from the old world. Everything they've saved now becomes the foundation of what they must rebuild. This pile of things is the start of civilization. But as the hours pass, the full weight of it settles in. 3 brothers, 3 wives, 8 people, and from them must come every soul that will ever walk the earth. They must populate continents, relearn forgotten crafts, rediscover lost languages, reimagine how to live. Ham looks out over the mud-filled valley, searching for optimism. "The soil," he says, gesturing, "it's rich. Once it dries, we can plant." Shem nods, but his thoughts are elsewhere. "We'll build the altar here," he says quietly. "Right here, on this peak, where God brought us to safety." Japheth remains silent, watching, thinking, already listening to what the earth might say next. Japheth is still standing at the edge, eyes scanning the horizon, silently studying the landscape like a map that hasn't yet revealed its secrets. His thoughts move faster than his words, cataloging every element they'll need to survive. Fresh water, There are streams visible now, snaking through the drying mud in the valleys below. Shelter will be another matter. They'll have to build from the ground up. No ruins to repurpose, no structures to restore. Food is sufficient for now, but it's a temporary comfort. Eventually, they'll need to hunt, to forage, to plant and cultivate. The practical demands are immense. But something else weighs on them far more than any labor: the silence. In the old world, even atop the highest peaks, the air still carried traces of human life. A dog's bark echoing from a nearby village. A rooster greeting the sun. The sound of children running and laughing. The distant murmur of civilization. Now, nothing. Only wind brushing against bare stone. Only the occasional cry of a bird they themselves released into this quiet wilderness. They are the only human voices left in a world once meant for millions. Noah's wife moves with steady focus. She begins to sort through their remaining supplies, her hands swift and sure. "We'll need to plant immediately," she says. Before the season shifts, her practicality becomes their anchor. Yes, the task is monumental. Yes, the loneliness cuts deep. But they are alive, and there is work to be done. That first night sleeping under an open sky is harder than any night they endured within the ark's confined shelter. Inside, they had walls, protection, predictability. Outside, the stars seemed colder, less like lights, more like eyes watching them with cosmic indifference. The wind stirs loose stones. Animal calls echo from the distant dark. Every sound is a reminder of how truly small they are now. Shem lies awake, staring into that endless sky. As the eldest, he feels the pressure like weight on his chest. Not just the duty to lead his own household, but to lead humanity itself. Every choice, every word, every mistake will ripple through generations not yet born. Ham lies nearby, but his thoughts race in a different direction. He sees the land stretched out before them, not as desolation, but as raw potential. Kingdoms yet to rise. Cities waiting to be carved from the mud. He imagines boundaries dividing it all. Territory. Power. But one question keeps looping through his mind, no matter how many times he tries to dismiss it. Who decides who gets what? Japheth doesn't think about land or authority tonight. He thinks about time. How long will it take for the valleys to dry? For the trees to regrow? For animals to be tamed again? For them to rediscover how to smelt metal, mold pottery, and construct homes not made of cloth and rope, but stone and wood? They don't realize it yet, but tonight, they are already shaping the very themes that will define their legacies. Leadership and authority. Territory and sovereignty. Innovation and adaptation. These questions will drive their descendants to create civilizations and to fall into conflict. But tonight, those future tensions sleep beside them on cold, uneven ground. For now, they are just three brothers, trying to rest beneath unfamiliar stars. Tomorrow, they will rise and begin. They will build altars and plant seeds. They will take the first steps toward populating an empty world. But tonight, they still lie in the shadow of the ark, listening to silence. A silence where once laughter and conversation filled the air. Tonight, they are still the last family alive, quietly preparing to become the first family of everything that comes next. Then, it happens. The first fire. A thin ribbon of smoke rises slowly from the valley floor, curling upward like a prayer made visible. After days of struggle with wetwood and damp kindling, they finally have flame. Real fire, bright, crackling, warm. It pierces the chill of evening and dispels the oppressive hush that has clung to them since stepping off the ark. Ham crouches beside it, tending the flame with a kind of fierce joy. This, he understands. The immediate, the tangible, the raw act of survival. While Shem had spent the day constructing an altar and offering their first sacrifices of thanksgiving, and while Japheth had observed the stars and charted thoughts of the future, it was Ham who cleared land, who gathered wood, who sparked the present into being. The fire changes everything, not just the warmth it brings or the light, but the feeling. It makes them feel human again. Gathered around its glow, they can pretend, just for a while, that they're a family sharing a quiet meal on a normal evening in a normal world. Their first cooked meal on solid ground tastes like something sacred, hope made edible. Grain from their stores mixed with wild herbs Ham and Japheth found growing near the rocks. The meat, carefully chosen, the decision to take it debated for hours. Every creature is now precious. Every pair is a seed for the future. But they also need to live. Noah's wife needs dough with muscle memory born of decades. We'll need to plant the wheat soon, she says. And barley, before the rains return. At the mention of rain, the fire quiets. They all pause. Not the great flood. Not that again. But ordinary rain, useful, needed, nurturing. Still, the word lingers. They've had weeks of sunlight. Still, dark clouds gather over distant ridgelines. Not a threat, yet, but not forgotten either. They talk through their plans around the flickering firelight. Shem speaks first. He wants to expand their farmland. Slowly, carefully. He sees permanence, fields, flocks, grain stored for lean seasons, a way of life built on stability and reverence. We build slow, he says, but we build to last. Hem sees something more dynamic. We could dam that stream, he suggests, pointing into the dim night. Make a pond, catch fish, and higher up the mountain, maybe copper, maybe iron. If we find metal, we could make tools again, real ones. Japheth listens, always listening. But when he speaks, his mind travels beyond the firelight. How far do we spread? He asks. Do we stay together? Or divide to cover more ground? He looks up at the stars. We don't even know what season this land has, what weather it brings, what risks lie ahead. Each brother speaks from his nature. Shem, family and faith. Ham, growth and gain. Japheth, patterns and possibility. For now, despite their differences, they work side by side. The next morning, they begin their first real building project. Not a boat this time, but a dwelling, a shelter. The tent they've used until now worked for transition. But now, they need something rooted. They pick a site, near the stream, but far enough to avoid flood. Close to their fire, but not so close that sparks could catch. Shielded from the worst wind, but open to the light of dawn. Every decision requires discussion. Every stone placed, every wall raised, reveals different priorities. Shem wants the door to face east. So we see the sunrise, he says. So we remember God's faithfulness every morning we wake. Ham argues for practicality. South-facing gives us warmth. We'll need that when winter comes. Japheth suggests something altogether different. We'll need more than one building, he says. Storage. Workshops. Space for children when they arrive. The children. They don't speak of it often. But the reality is always there, just beneath the surface. These three brothers and their wives must become the roots of all humanity. Every embrace carries a purpose now. Every birth will carry the future on its tiny shoulders. Each child won't just be a blessing. They will be a necessity, a triumph of love, and of survival. Ham stands frozen in the doorway, staring at his father's exposed body. The wine, the vulnerability, the raw, unmistakable humanity of the man who once carried the weight of the world, who held their lives steady through the storm. A swirl of emotions floods Ham's mind. Pity for the old man, embarrassment, discomfort. But layered beneath those is something more dangerous, something darker. A quiet sense of reversal of power shifted. For the first time, Ham feels like the strong one, and his father the weak. The great patriarch, helpless, laid bare. Ham could have turned away. He could have covered Noah quietly, respectfully, and walked out without a word. He could have chosen dignity, but he doesn't. Instead, he makes a different choice. He seeks out his brothers. Come see, he says. There's something you need to witness. There's something in his tone hard to place. Not outright mockery, but it carries no reverence, no grace. Come see our righteous father, he says again, voice tinged with something bitter. Shem and Japheth exchange a look. From the doorway, they can already hear the sounds, the murmur of a man in drunken sleep, the strained, uneven breath of intoxication. They don't need to ask questions. They understand what Ham is really showing them. Where Ham sees opportunity, humiliation, control, perhaps even a twisted triumph, his brothers see only one thing: responsibility. Shem quietly retrieves a cloak from his tent. Japheth helps him lift it over their shoulders. Together, they walk backwards into Noah's tent, eyes averted, moving with careful steps so as not to look upon their father's nakedness. They cover him gently, then retreat, still facing away. The moment defines them. Ham looked and called others to look. He treated his father's weakness as something to be witnessed, maybe even weaponized. His response reveals a heart that craves power but lacks compassion, strength without honor. Shem and Japheth refused. They chose not to see, chose not to exploit. They treated their father's vulnerability as something sacred, something to be shielded. Their response revealed reverence, quiet strength, compassion clothed in dignity. The next morning, Noah awakens with a pounding head and a fogged memory. The wine has blurred the finer details, but the broad truth is clear. He drank too much. He fell unconscious in his tent. He was exposed. And now, he knows he was seen. He feels it in the way Ham won't meet his gaze over breakfast. He senses it in the strained way Ham speaks to him. Something has shifted in the family dynamic. And when Noah pieces together exactly what occurred, when he learns, through his wife's careful phrasing and his son's uneasy silence, his response is swift and final. He gathers his sons. His voice carries the solemnity of judgment and the weight of prophecy. "Cursed be Canaan," he declares, "Ham's son. He shall be a servant to his brothers." He continues, voice steady, "Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and let Canaan serve him. May God enlarge Japheth's territory, and let him dwell in Shem's tents, and let Canaan serve them both." The curse doesn't fall on Ham directly, but on his child, on Canaan. It's a choice that generations of readers will question. Why curse the son for the father's wrongdoing? What did Canaan, still a boy, do to deserve this fate? But Noah's words speak from somewhere beyond reason. They feel less like punishment and more like prophecy. He sees something in Ham, something that won't end with him. A hunger for control without wisdom, a disrespect for sacred order, a trait that, Noah believes, will live on through his bloodline. And with those words, the family is divided. Ham's face flushes with a volatile mix of shame and fury. His wife gathers little Canaan in her arms protectively. The other sons remain quiet, unmoving. Shem stands still, shoulders tight. Japheth watches without speaking. Then Ham says the words aloud. "You were drunk." The statement falls like a blade. Noah looks at him. "Yes," he replies. "I was drunk. But you were awake." Nothing more is said. But the fracture is complete. The unity that once carried them through the flood is undone, not by catastrophe, but by wine and pride, by silence and exposure, by the fragile, complicated weight of being both father and son. From this moment forward, Ham will never fully yield to Noah's authority again. Shem, burdened by the words of blessing, will carry it like a mantle he never asked to wear. And Japheth, true to his nature, will live in the space between them, balancing distance and loyalty. And Canaan, little Canaan, will grow under the long shadow of a curse he cannot understand, spoken by a grandfather he barely knows, marked by a legacy that feels impossibly heavy for such small shoulders. The vineyard, now fruitful, continues to yield its grapes, but the innocence they once knew has evaporated. What began as survival has grown into something far more complicated. They've learned now that survival is not enough, that character matters, that even in a cleansed world, the old flaws remain. Even on sacred ground, human nature repeats itself. Curse and consequence. The morning after Noah's decree is heavy with silence. The weight of what's been spoken lingers in every corner of their mountain home. What began as a personal conflict has now become something far greater, a prophetic declaration that will echo through generations. A divide that will ripple outward into nations and histories. Ham moves through the settlement like a man haunted. His anger simmers beneath the surface. Steady, controlled, but sharp. He doesn't speak against Noah, not openly. He knows rebellion would bring more harm to his family. But every word he swallows becomes a stone inside his chest. He throws himself into his work with relentless focus. His hands are never still. His tools are always busy. His wife tends to young Canaan with fierce devotion. The child is too small to understand what's been spoken over his life. But he feels it, in glances that linger too long, in voices that soften too much. In the awkward way the others treat him, no longer with joyful welcome, but with quiet pity. Shem wrestles with his role. He never asked to be the chosen one. The weight of blessing is no less heavy than the burden of curse. His bond with Ham becomes strained, nearly unbearable. How do you comfort a brother whose child you've been told will serve your descendants? How do you stay a family when destiny itself has spoken of division? Japheth, as always, is caught in the middle. His blessing was expansion, growth, but not full independence. He was told he would dwell in Shem's tents, benefit from Shem's spiritual inheritance. He's been honored, but not quite as an equal. Noah's curse exposes the complicated reality of divine judgment. Why should Canaan pay the price for something he never did? The boy wasn't even there when Ham entered the tent. He had no part in that moment. Noah offers no answer, no further prophecy. When his daughters-in-law question him in whispers, he only says, "I speak what I see." Whether that vision came from divine insight, fermented sorrow, or the hardened wisdom of an old man, he does not say. But the consequences begin immediately. Ham's construction projects, once celebrated as progress, are now viewed with suspicion. Who is he building for? Is it for the good of all, or the start of something else? When Ham proposes expanding their settlement further into the valleys, Shem pushes back. He questions the wisdom of spreading too thin. But beneath his concern lies something more, a doubt that has taken root and cannot be shaken. When Ham suggests they explore the land stretching beyond the mountain, Japheth wonders aloud if this impulse isn't just wanderlust, but something deeper. Is Ham trying to escape the weight of the curse? Trying to outrun the shadow it's cast over him and his son? The women feel the strain even more keenly than the men. The bond they once shared, that quiet sisterhood forged during the hardest days of rebuilding, has thinned. What was once effortless closeness now feels like strained civility. They still labor side by side, because survival requires it. Meals must be prepared. Children must be tended. But the warmth has faded. What remains feels more like duty than kinship. Noah's wife, the matriarch who held them together through the storm and everything that followed, now finds herself facing a challenge she never expected. She watches as her family quietly unravels, split by words of blessing and words of curse, by shame and pride. She tries to weave them back together, to restore what once was. But her daughters-in-law respond with gentle resistance, each more protective now, each fiercely guarding the futures of their own children. The curse has infected the ordinary. It transforms every moment into something heavier. Even the children's play carries tension. Parents watch too closely. Is Canaan being too rough? Are Shem's sons being unfair? Are they dominating him, or merely playing as boys do? Every argument between the children now carries a silent question. Is prophecy unfolding already? Ham's speech shifts, almost imperceptibly. Where once he spoke of us and ours, now he speaks of my plans, my family. The change in language is subtle, but unmistakable. He's preparing for departure for something separate. He envisions a life apart from his brothers. Shem tries to hold them together. He reaches out, organizes meals, tries to recreate shared purpose. But everything he does feels strained. Hollow. How can you treat someone as an equal when divine words have already set you above them? The gap only grows. And behind it all, theological unease simmers. If Noah's words truly hold the weight of prophecy, then Canaan's servitude is not a punishment, it is a fate. A destiny passed down not by deeds, but by a father's pride and a grandfather's anger. But if those words were not divine at all, if they were merely pain wrapped in the trappings of holiness, then the family has been cleaved apart for no higher purpose at all. And the not knowing, that is the worst part. They cannot discard the words, but neither can they fully understand them. And Ham's behavior begins to harden. He does not move toward repentance. He does not ask for restoration. Instead, his pride festers. His wounded ego becomes armor. He starts to push back on everything. Where once he deferred to Noah in spiritual matters, now he questions. Where once he supported communal decisions, now he challenges. Where once he collaborated with Shem and Japheth, now he resists. Shem proposes a shared sacrifice. Ham declines. Japheth suggests a new building project. Ham insists on doing it alone. The Ham they knew, the one who labored tirelessly through the early days of survival, whose strength was indispensable, is shifting, becoming someone else, someone sharper, angrier, more isolated. And in that transformation, Noah's curse begins to feel less like judgment and more like foresight. Canaan, still a child, becomes a living emblem of this slow, aching fracture. In his eyes, so unaware, so trusting, they see the questions that will echo long after they are gone. Will he accept what others say is his role? Will he rebel? Will he rise above it, or be crushed by it? Will the curse live on in him, or end with him? The boy does not yet understand any of this. He plays with his cousins, helps with chores, learns the skills every child must learn. But changes have already begun. Tasks that once rotated now fall to him more often. Responsibilities subtly shift his way. Patterns begin to form quietly, invisibly, but undeniably. Noah grows older beneath the weight of what he has spoken. The man who once obeyed God and saved a world now questions the origin of his own words. Did that curse truly come from God? Or was it born of grief and pride? But the words have been spoken, and words, once set loose into the world, cannot be gathered back. The rhythm of daily life continues, but the harmony is broken. They eat their meals in silence or with overly cautious conversation. They share labor, but no longer joy. They pray to the same God, but each man prays from a different place in his heart. Ham's wife begins to speak softly, privately, about leaving. Not immediately. Not yet. Winter approaches, and they still depend on shared strength to endure it. But she plants seeds in Ham's thoughts. Why should their son grow beneath the shadow of someone else's declaration? Why should they accept less when they've given so much? Shem's wife carries a guilt she never expected. The blessing meant to lift her children feels like a weight, a fracture wrapped in favor. She watches her sister-in-law with sadness, knowing they are now divided by something neither of them chose. Japheth's wife says little. She always was the quiet one, but she sees more than anyone suspects. She sees how voices fall quiet when she enters a room. She sees how gifts and duties are now assigned not by need, but by bloodline. She sees how her husband retreats into tasks to avoid the emotional tangle of dinners and decisions. The curse begins to fulfill itself, not by divine force, but through human reaction. Ham's bitterness becomes distance. That distance breeds misunderstanding. Misunderstanding sparks friction. Friction becomes conflict, and conflict begins to mirror the very future the curse predicted. By the time winter's grip begins to loosen, the separation is almost complete, not through thunder or decree, but through stubbornness, pride, and the terrifying truth that words have power, even when they are spoken in pain. The curse will fulfill itself, not because it was fated, but because they believed it, and because they acted as though it were true. That knowledge, sour and sobering, lies ahead of them, not yet realized. For now, they still share the same mountain, the same dwindling warmth, the same daily struggle. They still lean on each other more than they admit. The curse has been spoken, but its full consequence is still unfolding. A map lies stretched across the table, cracked wood beneath weathered hide. Charcoal lines and berry-stained ink mark its surface, a rough imagination of a future Earth. It's part prophecy, part plan. 3 pairs of hands hover over it, tracing lines, pointing to distant lands. 3 voices overlap, asserting, defending, claiming. Inheritance and territory now dominate where once survival united them. Shem gestures eastward, toward the land that will one day be known as the cradle of civilization. His finger traces winding rivers and fertile plains. Good soil, he says. Reliable water. Close enough to stay connected to father's camp. Ham's hand sweeps broader. The south has promise, he says. Warmer seasons, different crops. And look, access to vast seas. Imagine the trade, the movement, the possibilities. Japheth points to the north. His voice quieter, more speculative. There's room to grow, he says. Distance. Freedom. Who knows what's waiting beyond those mountains? And so it begins. The division of the world. Not as enemies, but no longer as one. Later generations will look back and say this division was ordained. The Book of Jubilees will describe it as divine will. But in this moment, it begins as all things do, with hands on a map, and hearts already apart. According to later accounts passed down through ancient texts, it was Noah himself who oversaw the division of lands, presiding over the allocation of the earth among his 3 sons. He ensured that each would receive a portion suited to his temperament, his destiny, and the unfolding story of his bloodline. But the scene, in reality, feels less divine than the scrolls would later suggest. It feels deeply human. 3 brothers standing around a map. Their aging father watching, growing frail. Their children playing in the distance as inheritance is debated. And beneath it all, theology wrapping itself around family politics. Practical choices clothed in the language of divine purpose. The eastern lands hold a special kind of resonance. This is the cradle of the first world. Before the flood, it was here that civilization flourished. From this soil rose cities and kings, laws and commerce, the first alphabets etched in clay, the earliest records of stars and seasons. Writing, mathematics, irrigation, astronomy, agriculture, all had roots in the east. Shem's claim to these territories signals continuity, a through line from what was to what will be. Ham, in contrast, receives the southern domains. These lands offer other gifts. Heat that permits multiple harvests per year. Rivers that flood predictably, leaving behind fertile silt. Pathways that will one day become trade routes linking continents. His vision stretches wide, toward expansion, influence, and empire. Where Shem conserves, Ham seeks to build anew. Japheth claims the north. His eyes are always drawn to the horizon, to space, to possibility. His lands stretch beyond their sight lines, open and wild. Here is room to move, to multiply without pressure, to experiment without the burden of preserving legacy. It suits his nature, restless, curious, untethered. The ancient chronicles speak of divine casting, of celestial guidance directing the brothers' hands. But they also hint, softly, at human instinct. quiet calculations, unspoken compromises. This division works for each of them. It gives them enough space to grow without immediately clashing. It suits the tension born of Noah's earlier curse. Noah's own role in this process is never fully clear. Does he receive instruction from God and assign the land accordingly? Or is he simply giving his blessing to decisions his sons have already made? Or perhaps he sees this as a way to diffuse the strain, an act of leadership to manage the rift caused by his own words? The map they draw carries assumptions, some of which will hold true. Others will crumble with time. They correctly foresee that their descendants will populate distant lands. That geography will shape culture. That deserts and rivers and mountain ranges will form the skeleton of nations. But they also fail to grasp the full vastness of the world. They imagine something smaller. They do not yet know how far Africa stretches south. They do not envision the full sweep of Europe's northern forests. Entire continents lie beyond their imagination. Unknown lands where the children of their children's children will one day walk. Even so, their act of dividing land is significant. This is the world's first political map, the birth of territorial sovereignty, the beginning of a new concept, that people belong to places and places belong to people. Geographic separation, they believe, can help prevent future conflict, while still allowing exchange and collaboration. Trade routes may cross boundaries. Alliances may form, but each group will know where its home begins and ends. Shem's territory becomes the seedbed of spiritual legacy. Temples will rise from his lands. Schools and scrolls will preserve divine law. His descendants will shape the relationship between humanity and the sacred. Here, the idea of covenant, of a binding promise between God and man, will take root and flourish. Ham's region, on the other hand, becomes the launchpad of power. From his domain will rise the earliest great empires: Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, Persia. These lands will pulse with wealth and ambition, sustained by rivers and conquest. And Japheth's path unfolds in the frontier. His descendants will be the innovators and voyagers, the ones who sail beyond the known, who stretch borders, who adapt and evolve in distant lands. But embedded in this act of division is the seed of discord. The lines they draw will not always be respected. Borders created with good intentions become front lines in future wars. What begins as healthy separation morphs into jealousy and suspicion. Between the children of Ham and Shem, hostilities will simmer and erupt, echoing through millennia. And while the men argue and divide, the women begin to feel the loss. Territorial division means the end of shared meals, the end of the communal rhythms that sustained them in the early years. No more joint cooking fires. No more shared child-rearing. No more evening conversations under the same stars. Their children, growing older, aware, absorb the tension. Some are excited. The idea of new lands stirs their young imaginations. But others grieve. Leaving behind cousins, routines, and friendships weighs heavy on them. Uncertainty gnaws at the edges of their joy. This division marks more than a line on a map. It is the moment when Noah's family ceases to be one household and becomes the many tribes of humanity. Cooperation fades into competition. Shared legacy splits into separate destinies. Ancient sources like the Book of Jasher elaborate on this transition. They describe formal ceremonies, vows made beneath the open sky, oaths taken before stone pillars, sacred rituals promising mutual respect. Each brother swears not to trespass beyond the lands given to him. Boundaries are agreed upon in solemn reverence. But even those texts hint at fragility. Oaths, once made, don't always bind the next generation. Stones can be moved. Maps can be redrawn. Sacred rituals fade when survival becomes desperate. And yet the same map that divides also connects. The rivers drawn to separate the territories are also arteries of trade. The mountains that mark boundaries also contain secret passes. The earth, by its very nature, resists being split forever. It is both divided and unified. As winter approaches and final preparations are made, the emotional reality settles in. They've done it. They survived the unthinkable. Together, they weathered the flood. Together, they rebuilt. But now, they must go their separate ways, and trust that in separating, they will not destroy what they once shared, but instead fulfill the greater purpose of restoring the human story. This moment marks a turning. The age of Noah draws to its close. The age of his sons begins. From this point onward, the drama of humanity will not be the story of one man and his descendants, but of many peoples, many voices, many cultures, each shaped by geography, memory, belief, and ambition. Shem, the chosen line. The morning sun breaks over the mountain as smoke curls upward from the altar he's built on the eastern slope. The stones are carefully fitted, each one selected with intention. The structure faces the sunrise, a symbol of beginning. Every detail reflects Shem's devotion, the stillness in his hands, the reverence in his eyes. While his brothers dream of cities and trade and exploration, Shem kneels. He remembers. He preserves. He builds with sacred purpose. The weight of spiritual legacy rests on him, not as burden, but as calling. He understands what others overlook. Someone must maintain the thread between heaven and earth. And God has given him both the vision and the land to do so. His inheritance stretches toward the dawn. Rivers nourish his valleys. Hills rise to offer safety. The climate supports herds and harvest. It is a land fit not only for living, but for remembering. And more than land, Shem carries something invisible yet immense, the spiritual inheritance of being the son of the man who walked with God. The stories of creation and flood, the knowledge of divine law, the sacred responsibility to preserve and pass these truths down across generations. This is the legacy Shem carries. And his wife, she understands it deeply. She supports it not reluctantly, but fully. Where others might resent long hours spent in meditation and prayer, she sees such devotion as the lifeblood of their survival. To her, these acts are not distractions from real work. They're the work. Someone must remember. Someone must teach. Someone must tend the relationship between heaven and earth. Their children grow up surrounded by reverence. They know the sacred stories before they even learn their letters. They grasp the meaning of sacrifice before they understand trade or barter. They are taught their place in God's covenant long before they ever find their place in the world. This spiritual immersion shapes every decision Shem makes as he builds his portion of the new world. His settlements are not laid out for economic advantage or military strength, but centered on worship. His laws are not born from political necessity, but from divine instruction. His leadership style is defined by moral clarity more than strategic efficiency. And this pattern he sets of righteousness over pragmatism will echo down the centuries. His descendants will be the ones who construct the first temples, who formalize priesthoods, who codify the first laws in writing, and who shape the first systematic theological frameworks. They will become a people defined by sacred text, the people of the book, the keepers of covenant. But with spiritual privilege comes spiritual weight. Shem is not just preserving the revelations handed down from his father. He must also seek new understanding. For the old order was swept away by the flood. The divine, human relationship that existed before no longer applies. New patterns must now be discerned. His prayers are filled with gratitude, yes, but also haunted by uncertainty. Why were they saved? What now does God require? How should they structure life in a way that prevents the corruption that once brought judgment? The answers don't come in thunder or flame, not in divine apparitions. They come slowly, through seasons, through outcomes, through patient reflection. Shem begins to read divine intention not in visions, but in the yield of his fields, in the birth rate of his herds, in the harmony or unrest within his people. For him, divine favor reveals itself in quiet blessings. This philosophy will become the hallmark of his lineage. They will seek God's will not in ecstatic experiences, but in careful observation of cause and effect. They will build complex systems, laws, rituals, calendars, crafted to keep divine favor intact. And they will become the most spiritually advanced culture the world has ever known. But that advancement will bring its own dangers. What begins as a system to preserve truth can turn into a system that replaces it. What starts as worship can become empty repetition. Laws meant to guide can become walls that divide. Shem sees the risk, but he doesn't yet know how to solve it. How do you protect divine insight from being reduced to tradition? How do you guard revelation without making it rigid? How do you build a relationship with God that lasts beyond your own lifetime, one that crosses generations, languages, and cultures? His answer is balance. Preserve the core. Adapt the application. Let the truths remain eternal, but allow their interpretation to speak to each new age. That philosophy, both rooted and flexible, will define his lineage's spiritual evolution. They will become both the most traditional and the most adaptive religious people, conservative in what they hold sacred, progressive in how they live it. The blessing spoken over Shem by Noah carries this double edge, both promise and duty. Blessed be the Lord God of Shem. The words matter. God is named as the God of Shem, But Shem is not called the son of God. He is favored, but not deified. He is chosen, but not divine. This distinction becomes foundational. Shem's line will always see itself not as gods among men, but as servants of the divine, receivers of revelation, not the origin of it, channels, not sources. And that humility will shape their spiritual posture for generations to come. But the weight is not light. Shem watches his brothers prepare their departures, Ham with his ambition, Japheth with his curiosity, and he knows each possesses strengths he does not. They will build cities, conquer land, innovate, but only Shem carries the obligation to guard the truth. Their legacies will be measured in structures built, territories ruled. Shem's legacy will be measured in truths preserved, in covenants maintained, in altars that still burn after empires fall. The eastern lands suit this task. Rich in soil, central in geography, ideal for teaching and transmission. From this ground will arise prophets and scribes, legal codes and moral systems, new theologies and ancient prayers. From here, the world's understanding of the divine will be shaped for millennia. But all of that still lies ahead. For now, Shem is simply a man kneeling beside an altar, trying to listen. A father passing sacred memory to his children. A leader building a small, faithful community from which great rivers of spiritual legacy will flow. His altar stands firm, stone upon stone, oriented to the east, toward the sun that rises anew each day. It is built to endure, to remember, to call down grace. Its smoke ascends in the still morning, a visible prayer, a fragile bridge between earth and heaven, a reminder that some things are worth preserving no matter the cost. Then there is Ham, the father of conflict. His hammer rings against the anvil with urgent precision. Metal sparks dance in the air as iron bends beneath his will. This is Ham's world, not of quiet prayers, but of loud creation. Not of sacred memory, but of raw, unrelenting forward motion. He is not contemplative like Shem, nor speculative like Japheth. Ham is active, assertive, resolute. He builds not altars, but empires. On the southern slope of their settlement, his forge dominates the terrain. Anvil, firebit, racks of tools. Everything is arranged with the efficiency of someone who knows that time is a resource and strength a currency. His children cluster around the firelight, watching his every move. They are learning the values he lives, act rather than reflect, build rather than bless, conquer rather than consider. He teaches them simply, if you see a need, fill it. If you see a weakness, use it. If you see an opportunity, take it. This is the core of Ham's legacy. Not the blessings or the curses, but the relentless drive to shape the world rather than be shaped by it. He sees the post-flood world not as sacred ground to be tended, but as empty space to be claimed. A vast canvas for ambition, a realm to dominate. Resources, in Ham's eyes, are not gifts to be honored. They are tools to be used. To Ham, the other survivors scattered across the land are either allies or obstacles. Nothing in between. His portion of the divided earth fits him perfectly. The southern territories stretch wide, reaching into warmer climates and abundant potential. Rivers wind predictably through plains, flooding and receding in rhythm, leaving behind soil rich enough to sustain empires. Minerals lie hidden beneath rock, waiting to be mined and forged. Trade routes begin to take shape, arteries that will one day connect far-flung peoples. But Ham doesn't just see farmland or trade opportunities. He sees something far more ambitious. The foundation for empire. His vision exceeds anything his brothers consider. He dreams of cities so vast they'll make the old world's capitals seem like outposts. Armies that don't just defend, but expand. Trade networks not just for survival, but for power that could make his descendants wealthier than any have imagined. And the curse spoken over his son, Canaan, only fuels the fire of that ambition. If his bloodline has been marked for servitude, then he will show the world that servants can rise, can dominate, through sheer will and strategic mastery. If others think him diminished, he will make their underestimation his greatest advantage. His wife stands by him. The worry lines her face. She's seen the change. Since Noah's words fell heavy across their family, Ham's easy confidence has hardened into something steelier, more relentless. The brother who once shared openly with his kin now calculates each gesture, measures every interaction. Generosity has given way to competition. Their children feel it too. They carry the weight of their father's expectations, not just to succeed, but to prove something, to vindicate their lineage, to overturn the shame of the curse with triumphs that cannot be denied. None feel this more than Canaan. The child who bears the curse now bears the burden of redemption. Ham pushes him harder than the others, demands more. expects greatness not just as a hope, but as a necessity. Canaan, still young, tries to comply. He wants his father's pride, his approval. But confusion shadows his eyes. Why must he try harder than the rest? Why does every achievement feel like a test he must pass? As the seasons pass, Ham's construction efforts evolve into something grander. Beyond workshops and storehouses now rise monuments and bastions, structures of stone and fire, declarations of permanence and command. He's no longer just building for utility. He's building for legacy, to be seen, to be remembered, to assert presence and authority. His brothers observe these changes with increasing concern. Shem, guided by caution and conscience, fears that Ham is repeating the arrogance of the pre-flood world, the very hubris that drew God's judgment. Japheth, always curious but balanced, questions whether such rapid, aggressive expansion is sustainable, especially with their numbers still so small. But Ham ignores their warnings. They think too small, he says. Why settle for survival when we've been given the chance to dominate? To him, the flood was not merely a reset, it was an opportunity, a blank canvas. And he intends to fill it with something far greater than what came before. He sends scouts farther south than anyone from their family has yet dared to go. He experiments with new breeds of animals, new crops that suit the warmer lands. He begins to establish contact with the scattered groups of survivors they've discovered, others who somehow endured the flood by retreating to mountaintops or caves, small tribes clinging to ancient memory and hope. While Shem offers them spiritual guidance and Japheth trades knowledge and tools, Ham sees something else: strategic advantage, potential allies, future subjects. He weighs each group by their usefulness, calculates what it would take to absorb them into his growing influence. And his approach works. Some groups willingly accept his leadership in exchange for protection, resources, and the promise of stability. Others, more hesitant, agree to trade. A few resist and are brought into line by the quiet but unmistakable threat of superior force. This pattern will echo for generations. Ham's descendants will be the empire builders, the conquerors. They will see difference not as diversity to embrace, but as a hierarchy to command. Their instinct will be to structure the world beneath them, layer by layer, people by people. But Ham's rising success comes at a price. His outward momentum leaves little space for internal repair. His marriage, once joyful and close, begins to wear under the weight of ambition. His wife, who once beamed with optimism, now speaks in hushed tones about the early days after the flood, when family unity had not yet fractured into rivalry. When they worked together not for dominance, but for survival, for restoration. She misses the closeness. She fears what is being sacrificed in the name of greatness. The other wives begin to notice too. Ham's wife, once the most cheerful among them, has grown distant, guarded. Where once she shared openly, now she speaks cautiously, loyally in public, but questions everything in private. She still supports Ham, but wonders at what cost. Ham, for his part, is too consumed to notice. His eyes are fixed on a vision that transcends personal happiness. He's no longer building for today. He's constructing a legacy, one that will outlive him, one that must. His relationships grow increasingly strained, not just with his wife and children, but with his brothers. His expansion pushes at the limits of what was agreed upon. His alliances with outside tribes raise suspicion. Is Ham still loyal to the family? Or is he forging a nation that stands apart? His accumulation of wealth and resources suggests ambition that stretches beyond his assigned borders. What began as unspoken tension rooted in a curse now manifests as very real disputes. Disputes over land, over rights, over boundaries. Ham's men begin hunting on Shem's side of the territory. Shem's people protest, Ham's miners digging near their mountain line. Arguments escalate. Both sides arm themselves. They prepare, not for negotiation, but for confrontation. Japheth, caught in the middle, attempts to mediate. He offers compromises, proposes shared arrangements. But his efforts only expose the deep divide. Ham frames every disagreement as a matter of strength versus weakness. Shem sees every decision through the lens of right versus wrong. And between these worldviews, no peace can last. The world stands on the brink of its first war. A war not between strangers, but between brothers. A war not for survival, but for dominance. Ironically, the very drive that fuels Ham's rise, the ambition that sought to overcome the curse, now shapes the circumstances that will make the curse seem fulfilled. And so, war approaches. But not yet. For now, Ham continues to build. He continues to plan, to dream, to carve cities into the bones of the earth, hoping his children will one day rule them. The curse that was meant to humble his lineage becomes the force that propels it forward, straight into the conflict that will define them. And high above, in the silent moments before sunrise, Japheth watches. The forgotten brother. Alone beneath the turning stars, he begins to see patterns that no one else is looking for. In a world reborn, Japheth perceives the intricate patterns woven into existence, cycles within cycles that dictate the rhythms of seasons, weather, planting, and harvest. His gift lies in seeing beyond the fleeting moment, grasping the hidden frameworks that govern the natural order. While Shem dedicates himself to the divine ordinances and Ham chases dominion over the earth, Japheth pursues an understanding of the principles that shape both heaven and soil. His inheritance sprawls across the northern reaches, a land many would deem harsh and uninviting. Frigid winters, brief summers, vast woodlands, and desolate plains. These territories seem less bountiful than the milder domains of his brothers. Yet Japheth discerns opportunities where others see only hardship. The cold, he notes, preserves provisions, enabling meticulous planning and storage. The dense forests yield abundant timber for construction and fuel to ward off the chill. The open expanses offer boundless space for growth, free from the conflicts that arise in crowded lands. These challenges, he believes, will forge his descendants into a resilient, adaptable people. His approach to building settlements mirrors his methodical mind. Unlike Ham, who erects grand monuments to proclaim his might, or Shem, who crafts sacred spaces to honor the divine, Japheth designs with purpose and efficiency. His structures prioritize function over splendor, his tools crafted for utility rather than adornment. This pragmatic mindset extends to his interactions with others. Japheth neither seeks to rule like Ham nor to shepherd like Shem. Instead, he observes, learns, and adjusts, fostering alliances that benefit all parties. He weaves networks of mutual cooperation rather than chains of command. His wife values this equilibrium, never vying for his attention against lofty dreams or spiritual quests. Japheth cherishes their partnership, involving her in every plan and decision. Their union becomes a blueprint of equality, a legacy their children will inherit. Those children are raised to think independently, unburdened by strict doctrines or demands for blind loyalty. Japheth encourages them to observe keenly, reason critically, and devise inventive solutions to life's trials. This upbringing shapes a distinct breed of individual, neither as devout as Shem's offspring nor as driven as Ham's. Japheth's children grow curious and versatile, innovative yet diplomatic. The northern wilds serve as their crucible, where survival demands constant adaptation to shifting conditions and success hinges on solving novel problems. Leadership among them arises from skill, not birthright or decree. Japheth's people pioneer technologies that ripple outward, superior methods to preserve food, efficient heating for icy climates, refined tools for shaping wood and metal. Through trade and intermarriage, these innovations reach his brother's descendants, who build upon them in turn. Yet Japheth's most enduring legacy is not technological but intellectual. He lays the groundwork for ways of thinking that will blossom into philosophy and science, methods of observation and inquiry that uncover the laws governing existence. His approach diverges sharply from his brother's. Shem seeks truth in divine revelation and sacred tradition, Ham through conquest and practical mastery. Japheth, however, pursues truth through careful study and experimentation. This distinction shapes their legacies. Shem's line will safeguard and interpret sacred wisdom. Ham's will harness and exploit worldly gains, while Japheth's will challenge assumptions, forging new paths to understanding. Noah's blessing over Japheth carries both promise and nuance. May God expand Japheth's domain and let him dwell in Shem's tents. It speaks of growth, yet suggests reliance on another's spiritual guidance. This duality defines Japheth's place within the family. He is independent enough to carve out his own realm and civilization, yet open to drawing from his brother's strengths. He refines what proves effective without seeking glory or supremacy. This suits his temperament. He has no ambition to assume Shem's role as spiritual guide or Ham's hunger for empire. Japheth finds fulfillment in exploration, innovation, and adaptation, leaving leadership's burdens to others. This understated approach often renders him overlooked. His deeds lack the grandeur of his brother's achievements. His influence is quiet, seeping into the fabric of life rather than demanding notice. His siblings sometimes exploit this, assuming Japheth's acquiescence because he seldom protests. They undervalue his insight, mistaking his restraint for lack of ambition, and neglect his needs, as he rarely asserts them. This dynamic breeds its own tensions. Japheth's even temper makes him the family's peacemaker, but his success hinges on his brother's willingness to compromise. When their stances harden, his diplomacy falters. The rift between Shem and Ham places Japheth in a bind. Both brothers seek his allegiance, each believing he will naturally align with them due to past harmony. Yet Japheth finds merit in both views. Shem's devotion to divine favor and family unity commands respect, while Ham's resolve to prosper and surmount obstacles deserves backing. Their clash arises not from malice, but from irreconcilable perspectives. Japheth's efforts to mediate leave both dissatisfied. Shem sees his neutrality as spiritual wavering. Ham views his balance as cowardice cloaked in sagacity. Their doubts wound Japheth deeply, though he conceals the pain. He has always been the brother who unites, the one who bridges divides. To face their distrust stings, yet it frees him to focus on his own people and vision. The northern lands offer vast canvas for his aspirations. His descendants will roam far, adapting to diverse climates and terrains. They will become the great wanderers and explorers, pushing the limits of human settlement. Yet they will also be synthesizers, blending ideas from disparate cultures into novel forms. Their far-flung homes will make them traders and diplomats by necessity, their adaptability casting them as connectors between civilizations. This role, the overlooked brother who binds humanity's diversity, marks Japheth's profound contribution. Less celebrated than his brother's feats, it ensures civilization remains vibrant and interconnected, not rigid or isolated. Far to the south, where two rivers converge, a child was born destined to reshape the world. Nimrod, Ham's grandson, carried a fierce spark within him, a refusal to yield. The old world had perished beneath the flood, but in this new one, power still beckoned to those bold enough to seize it. From his earliest days, Nimrod heeded that summons. His mother saw it in his gaze. While other children toyed with sticks and stones, Nimrod scanned the horizon, studying the disciplined flight of birds, noting how animals followed their strongest. Even as a youth, he grasped that some are born to command. Time passed, and Nimrod grew into a towering figure, his hands steady, his aim unerring. When he ventured into the wilds, he returned laden with game. The beasts learned to dread his tread. A mighty hunter before the Lord. The people murmured, words heavy with meaning. To hunt was to wield life and death. To be mighty was to hold sway over others. To stand before the Lord hinted at audacity. Nimrod's renown spread swiftly across the plains. Young men abandoned their families to follow him, eager to learn his craft and share his strength. Soon, he led a shadow army that swept across the land. At the river's confluence, the first city arose, Babylon, the gate of God. Nimrod planted his banner at its heart, proclaiming himself king. None had dared such a claim since the flood, consolidating power in one place. Yet Nimrod's vision stretched further. One city grew to 2, then 4, Babel, Erech, Akkad, Kala, each bearing his imprint, each bowing to his rule. The kingdom of Shinar spanned a week's journey. From its heart, Nimrod gazed north to Ashur's fertile lands beyond the mountains. He rallied his forces again, marching swiftly. Nineveh fell without resistance, followed by Rehoboth and Kala. Rezin, built by his hands, rose from nothing. Before Nimrod, people had lived scattered, tending flocks in small bands. He changed that, drawing them into cities with walls for protection, laws for order, and a leader who feared nothing, a figure unseen since Noah left the ark. Noah, still alive, had witnessed the old world's end. Now he saw a new one forged under his great-grandson's iron will. Some say he wept, others that he prayed, or simply watched, waiting for the tale's conclusion. Nimrod's cities thrived on trade. Merchants flocked from afar, Craftsmen honed new skills. Farmers supplied bustling markets. Gold and silver coursed through Babylon's streets. The people flourished, shielded by their king. Yet this prosperity exacted a toll. Freedom bowed to order's weight. Wild lands shrank. Ancient ways faded. Families, once independent, now crowded behind city walls. Few voiced dissent. Safety and full bellies quelled most unrest. Cities offered comfort, security, and a promise of greatness beyond mere survival. At dusk, Nimrod stood atop Babylon's walls, gazing at the smoke of countless hearths. His kingdom stretched endlessly, his people countless as stars. The world bent to his will, and it was good. But a deeper hunger gnawed at him, unquenched by conquest or wealth. The earth was his, but the heavens remained beyond grasp. The hunter's gaze turned skyward, his ambition now daring to challenge the divine. The people sensed their king's shift. His commands grew cryptic, his dreams audacious. Work began on a feat unprecedented, a structure to pierce the heavens. Nimrod had risen from a shattered world, united scattered tribes, and built an empire from dust. Now he would dare what would resound through ages. The tower was rising, a test of whether humanity had learned from the flood or if the pride that drowned the first world would summon judgment upon the second. The vision came to Nimrod in a dream, a ladder spanning earth to heaven, a path for mortals to ascend to God's realm. Awakening, the image seared his mind. He summoned his wisest advisors, architects, engineers, builders, planners, spreading designs across cedar tables. The tower would rise from Babylon's core, a man-made mountain. "Come," Nimrod proclaimed. "Let us build a city and a tower whose summit touches heaven. Let us forge a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered across the earth." His words stirred the soul, tapping into primal fears of oblivion, the yearning to endure beyond mortal limits, the drive to etch an eternal legacy. At dawn, work commenced. Every soul in Babylon had a task. Some mixed clay with straw, others molded bricks, while others stoked furnaces that hardened them to stone. The tower's rise bound them in purpose, a monument to defy their fragile existence and the threat of dispersal. Brick by brick, the tower rose with deliberate care, each layer of mortar and clay resting upon the one beneath. Its foundation sprawled as vast as a small city, its walls towering thick as a man's height. No endeavor of this magnitude had ever been conceived before. Months stretched into years, yet the people toiled with unwavering resolve, their hands shaping a structure that reached ever closer to the clouds. As they labored, their voices lifted in song, weaving tales of what awaited at the summit. Some spoke of glimpsing the garden where Adam once communed with God. Others dreamed of beholding the very throne room of heaven. From every corner of the known world, travelers flocked to witness the marvel. Merchants carried tales of the tower to far-off lands. Scholars journeyed for months to study its intricate construction, and kings dispatched envoys bearing tribute and offers of alliance. The tower transcended mere architecture. It became a beacon, a bold proclamation that humanity would not scatter like leaves in a storm. United, they would gather, build, and strive for the impossible. Each day, Nimrod ascended the growing structure, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Every new tier brought him nearer to his ambition, each brick a step toward divine heights. Below, the earth unfurled like a vast tapestry, and he, its sovereign. Yet above, in the celestial realms, the Lord gazed upon this work of mortal hands. He saw the tower piercing the sky like a defiant spear, heard the pride swelling in their voices with every brick laid, and discerned the ambition burning in their hearts. "Behold," he declared to the heavenly host, "they are one people, united by a single tongue. This is but the beginning of their deeds. Nothing will be beyond their reach." The judgment came swiftly, not with tremors or torrents, but with a force more ruinous. The gift that had bound them in harmony was stripped away. At dawn, confusion erupted. A laborer shouted for more bricks, but his comrades stared, uncomprehending. An architect issued commands, only to be met with vacant gazes. Across the sprawling worksite, voices rose in frustration and dread. Where once a single language had united them, now a cacophony of tongues divided them. Families found their neighbors' words incomprehensible, workers baffled by their overseer's instructions. The precise coordination that had raised the tower crumbled into chaos. Panic swept through Babylon like a blaze. People clustered with those who shared their speech, turning from those now alien. The unity that had fueled their grand endeavor shattered like fragile clay. Some persisted, desperate to continue, but the task was futile. How could they build as one when their words no longer aligned? How could they align their efforts without mutual understanding? Within days, the exodus began. Families gathered their possessions and abandoned Babylon, scattering across the earth, guided by the new tongues that defined their paths. The great convergence was over. The era of unity had ended. Nimrod stood alone atop his unfinished tower, gazing as his people vanished into the distance. His empire dissolved beneath him, his vision reduced to rubble. The conqueror of the earth could not conquer the heavens. The tower endured, a testament to human ambition and divine sovereignty. Winds and rains would erode it. Time would entomb it beneath centuries of dust, but its story would linger. Around campfires, generations would recount how humanity sought to storm heaven, only to be scattered to the earth's farthest reaches. The flood had judged human sin. Babel judged human pride. The grand experiment was finished. Noah's children would no longer share one tongue or one purpose, dispersing with their confusion to forge new nations from the ashes of lost unity. From Babel's ruins, Noah's descendants ventured into a vast, empty world, each family bearing their new language like a heavy yoke. Tribes diverged, following paths that led ever farther apart. The great scattering had begun. Shem's sons journeyed east, toward the dawn, crossing boundless plains and winding through mountain passes. They pitched their tents in the fertile lands between mighty rivers, their encampments stretching from the great sea's shores to the edges of known lands. Ham's children turned south and west, some tracing the great river through arid wastes, others following the endless sea's coast. They claimed territories rich with potential and peril, where their descendants would raise cities gleaming like gems in the wild. Japheth's line pressed north and west, crossing vast waters and scaling lofty peaks. They found forests teeming with game and plains ideal for their herds. The cold lands embraced them, distant shores beckoned. Each group carried echoes of the past, tales of the flood, the tower's hubris, and Noah's blessings and curses. These memories would shape the nations to come. Shem's sons settled the fertile east. Elam raised cities in the mountain shadow. Ashur claimed northern valleys. Arphaxad led his people toward the sunrise, while Lud and Aram found their places between. From Arphaxad's line sprang Sulla, then Eber, whose name birthed Hebrew, carrying Shem's blessing like a river of divine promise. Yet Shem's other sons forged their own paths, their cities and lands diverging in tongue and custom, bound only by shared ancestry. Ham's sons claimed the sun-warmed south. Cush built his realm amid burning sands, his cities rising along a great river, his people mastering gold and ivory as traders and warriors revered and feared. Mizraim guided his children to a life-giving river flowing north, its floods leaving fertile soil for abundant harvests. His descendants would erect monuments enduring millennia, unlocking the stars' secrets and the mysteries of death. Put settled the western lands by the Great Sea, his people becoming sailors navigating winds and currents, their ships carrying trade and conflict afar. Canaan claimed the precious strip between the sea and the Jordan, a land of rich soil, mild climate, and bubbling springs, a place flowing with milk and honey. Yet Noah's curse shadowed Canaan's line, its weight destined to haunt their descendants, their land promised to others, their cities fated to fall. Japheth's sons roamed furthest. Gomer led his people into the icy north, Magog claimed the steppes beyond great mountains, Madai settled the highlands, Javan sailed to distant isles, Tubal and Meshech built cities in the far north, and Tiras ventured to the world's edge. Each became a patriarch of countless nations, their offspring spreading like seeds on the breeze. Javan's children thrived on sea-girt isles, mastering trade and bronze, their warriors feared, their merchants welcomed. Gomer's line crossed rivers and mountains, thriving in forested, game-rich lands, their tribes honed by harsh climes. As time flowed, families grew into tribes, tribes into nations, nations into city-states claiming vast domains. Babel's languages evolved, trade routes linked distant peoples, warriors clashed over borders, and marriages wove families together. Humanity diverged yet intertwined, each nation recalling its roots, the flood, the tower, and the names Shem, Ham, Japheth. The world teemed with Noah's children, their voices rising in myriad tongues from dawn to dusk, from sea to mountain. The earth was replenished, but growth bred strife. Nations jostled like flocks in a narrow pass, vying for scarce resources and fertile lands. The strong pressed the weak, innocence faded, and Noah's sons became fathers of nations, ushering in a new chapter of conflict and creation. The tribes did not wander forever. Footprints hardened into roads, camps grew into villages, villages swelled into cities. From scattered clans, empires rose like peaks from the plain. Mizraim's heirs built their kingdom along a nurturing river, its northern flow bringing black soil with each flood. They mastered its rhythms, channeling its waters and storing grain to weather lean years. Cities gleamed along its banks, Memphis guarding the delta, Thebes ruling the south, with temples and towns between. Mizraim's land became the ancient world's granary, its people mastering arts unknown elsewhere, preserving the dead as if asleep, moving colossal stones, and charting the stars. Their pyramids pierced the desert sky, tombs for pharaohs entombed with treasures for the afterlife. Northward, Ashur's sons forged an empire between rivers, their capital on the Tigris commanding trade routes. Nineveh rose behind impregnable walls, its armies a scourge to all. Assyrian chariots, drawn by swift horses, and archers of uncanny precision shattered foes, their siege engines toppling any fortification. Yet they were more than warriors, amassing vast libraries, devising swift message relays, and governing diverse peoples with precision. Elam's children carved their realm from eastern mountains, their capital perched on a lofty plateau ringed by cloud-scraping peaks, controlling trade in silk, spices, and gems from fabled lands. Javan's sons sailed the wine-dark sea, their island cities poised on hills overlooking harbors, their philosophers and poets shaping thought for ages. Gomer's descendants settled cold forests, forging iron before others, their horsemen sweeping south like tempests. Canaan's sons built cities in their narrow, vital land, master traders and craftsmen whose purple dye and bronze adorned kings. Yet Noah's curse loomed, their land destined for others. Across the earth, empires rose and fell, kings claimed divine mandates, priests raised temples to forgotten gods, and warriors fought for fleeting glory. Through it all, Shem's blessing, Canaan's curse, and Japheth's expanse endured, Noah's words echoing in stone, blood, gold, and iron. Canaan's promised land, though small, was a treasure. From the Great Sea to the Jordan, its springs, streams, and rich soil nurtured vineyards and cities. The Canaanites tilled the earth, raised families beneath ancient hills, and buried their dead in stone-hewn caves. But Noah's curse clung to them, its prophetic weight undeniable. Cursed be Canaan, a servant to his brothers. Divided into tribes, Jebusites on Zion's hill, Hittites in northern valleys, Hivites and Perizzites in the highlands, Phoenicians along the coast, they thrived. Tyre and Sidon's harbors sent Phoenician ships worldwide, bearing a revolutionary alphabet of 22 letters, spreading writing to all peoples. Their purple dye, harvested from sea snails, cloaked royalty, symbolizing power. Yet some Canaanites veered into darkness, their temples hosting horrific rites. Moloch's brazen arms consumed infants amid drumming to mass cries, Asherah's shrines demanded sacred prostitution, and Baal's altars ran with blood. Worship turned to corruption, poisoning their cities, the land itself recoiling. Despite their artistry, bronze of unmatched beauty, thick-walled cities, glass vessels, chariots, and laws, their shame overshadowed their brilliance. Justice warped, mercy weakened, and the strong preyed unchecked. Visitors marveled at Canaan's wealth but recoiled at its temples, tales of depravity darkening its name. Meanwhile, in the southern desert, Shem's heirs through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob grew, promised the very land Canaan held, setting the stage for a divine reckoning. They had been told that the land would be theirs forever, a sacred inheritance passed down through divine promise. That promise was first spoken to Abraham when he stepped into the land for the very first time. To your descendants, I will give this country, the Lord declared. That covenant, once given, did not fade. It was reaffirmed to Isaac, and once more renewed to Jacob. The land of Canaan, though filled with other peoples, had been marked for a different destiny. While the children of Israel lived as strangers in Egypt for 4 centuries, the inhabitants of Canaan were unknowingly filling their measure. The measure of guilt, of injustice, of idolatry. Year by year, generation after generation, the corruption deepened. The guilty prospered while the innocent suffered. The land groaned beneath the weight of their deeds, bearing witness to injustice written into its soil. The day of reckoning approached. Moses was born during this exile, raised in Pharaoh's palace, a Hebrew in an Egyptian court. Joshua, forged in battle, was trained as a warrior and tested as a leader. The people of Israel had been tempered, hardened in the furnace of slavery, refined by 40 years wandering the wilderness. By the time they returned, they were no longer a broken people, they were an army. The conquest of Canaan would be swift. It would be fierce. One by one, the cities fell, walled strongholds crumbled before them. Their inhabitants either fled, submitted, or were annihilated. The land changed hands as surely and as predictably as the seasons turn with the passage of a year. Some cities chose peace and endured. Others resisted and were lost forever. A few disappeared so completely that even their names were forgotten to time. And through it all, the curse of Noah, spoken generations earlier, was unfolding in ways the old patriarch could never have foreseen. The Phoenicians, remnants of Canaan's line, would escape total ruin by setting sail. Their ships spread out across the Great Sea, carrying with them their brilliant alphabet and the purple dye that would color the robes of kings. Their colonies would rise along the coastlines of North Africa and Spain. Yet the very heart of Canaan, the land itself, would belong to others. Though once given to the children of Canaan, the land had been promised to the children of Abraham. And the promise, in the end, proved stronger than possession. The curse, more enduring than the temporary blessings that had preceded it. Noah's words, sparse and ancient, echoed through the centuries. Their weight did not diminish with time. "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem," he had declared. Those words echoed like the toll of a bell in a vast cathedral, reverberating across ages, shaping destinies. The children of Shem spread across the eastern lands, their tents rising across the plains, from riverbanks to high mountains. Their flocks grazed freely in green pastures. Their households multiplied until they filled the land like stars in the sky. The blessing was not abstract. It was visible, tangible, rooted in soil and family and worship. From Shem's line would come the knowledge of the one true God. While other peoples carved gods from stone, Shem's children remembered the Creator. While others bowed to the work of their hands, the descendants of Shem lifted their eyes toward heaven. The blessing was never merely about prosperity. It was always about purpose. The God of Shem had no intention of remaining confined to one family's tent. Through Shem's line, blessing would extend to all families of the earth. The promise would ripple outward, like rings from a stone cast into still waters. 10 generations after the flood, that promise came to rest upon one man, Abram. He lived in Ur, a city steeped in wealth and idolatry, where his father served the gods of Mesopotamia. But the God of Shem had not forgotten his people, even in a place so full of idols and false altars. The call came like lightning from a clear sky. Leave your country. Leave your people. Leave your father's household. Go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Abram heard and obeyed. He gathered Sarah, his wife, Lot, his nephew, packed their possessions, loaded beasts of burden, and walked away from the city of his ancestors. He stepped into the unknown. And with that step, the blessing of Shem began its long journey into the wider world. The land God led him to was the very territory occupied by the descendants of Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey, but full of people unwilling to surrender it. How then could the promise be fulfilled? God's ways are not man's ways. His timing does not follow the rhythms of human impatience. And so the promise waited for its appointed hour. For centuries passed before the descendants of Abraham would lay claim to their inheritance. But the promise was never forgotten. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac became the father of Jacob. And Jacob fathered 12 sons, who would become the 12 tribes of Israel. Through this family, the blessing of Shem flowed like a river, gaining momentum with every generation. When famine struck, the children of Israel went down to Egypt. They were honored at first, welcomed because of Joseph, who had risen to power in Pharaoh's court. But hospitality gave way to suspicion. Suspicion turned to fear. And fear, eventually, became chains. They became slaves. Yet even in slavery, the blessing endured. The more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. The harder they were pushed, the stronger they grew. God was preparing them. Moses was born in a slave's hut, but raised in Pharaoh's halls. Taught the wisdom of Egypt, but destined for something older and deeper. When the time came, he led them out, with signs, with wonders, with fire and water and miracles. At Mount Sinai, the blessing of Shem took new shape. The God who had once spoken to Noah now formed a covenant with Noah's descendants. I will be your God. You will be my people. And with that covenant came the law. More than commandments, more than legislation. It was revelation, God showing the world who he was. justice and mercy, holiness and compassion, truth and grace. The law became a mirror reflecting the divine character, but it was never meant to stay within Israel. The promise to Abraham had always included the nations. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. One family was chosen, not to hoard blessing, but to share it. One nation was called, not to dominate, but to serve. The prophets of Israel understood. They saw visions of a world redeemed, of a future where knowledge of the Lord would flood the earth like the seas cover the ocean floor. They spoke of a time when pilgrims from every land would journey to Jerusalem, not for conquest, but to learn, to understand the ways of God. But not all the children of Shem remembered this vision. Some forgot the purpose and clung only to the privilege. They built walls instead of bridges. They grew proud of their chosenness and forgot their calling. They mistook blessing for favoritism, and in doing so, they began to lose the very thing they had been given to share. The blessing bestowed upon Shem transformed into a weighty burden rather than a cherished gift. Yet a steadfast remnant clung to the vision, recalling Abraham's divine call to be a blessing to all nations. They recognized that Israel's fate was intertwined with the redemption of the world, paving the way for the promise to reach its ultimate culmination. Through Shem's lineage would emerge the one destined to bless every family on earth. The covenant with Abraham would find its fulfillment in his greatest heir, through whom the God of Shem would reveal himself to all peoples, the seed of the woman foretold to crush the serpent's head. From Shem's descendants came prophets proclaiming divine truths, priests offering atonement for sins, and kings ruling with justice and righteousness. The blessing wove its way through the tapestry of history, enduring while other nations rose and fell like waves crashing upon the shore, empires blooming and wilting like fleeting flowers. The promise held firm, as the God of Shem fulfilled his purpose through the children of the covenant. Japheth's blessing stood apart from his brothers. God shall enlarge Japheth, Noah had declared, the word for enlarge evoking vastness, open spaces, and boundless growth. This pledge of expansion would resound through the ages. While Shem's heirs settled the fertile east and Ham's sons forged kingdoms in the warm south, Japheth's descendants gazed toward uncharted horizons. A restless spirit stirred within them, a yearning for the unknown driving them to wander. Like seeds scattered by the wind, Japheth's sons ventured north and west, crossing mighty rivers and scaling towering peaks. They discovered valleys shrouded in mist and plains stretching beyond sight, filling empty lands with life. Gomer guided his people into the frigid north, where survival demanded resilience. They crafted homes from the timber of sprawling forests and hunted the great beasts of the wilderness. The harsh climate forged their strength, giving rise to tribes known as Scythians and Cimmerians. Mastering the horse before others, they rode across the steppes like tempests, striking swiftly and vanishing. Their warriors, feared by settled peoples, could loose arrows from galloping steeds with lethal precision, traveling tirelessly for days. Yet Gomer's children were more than raiders. They were pioneers, forging iron before others unlocked its secrets, devising new warfare tactics and governance systems, dominating the northern realms. Magog's descendants pressed deeper into lands where winter's sun barely rose and summer's light lingered endlessly. They thrived in extremes of ice and radiance, their size and strength becoming legendary. Tales spoke of colossal warriors snapping spears barehanded, their remote homeland whispered of as a mythic realm. Madai's line claimed lofty plateaus between sea and ocean, building cities where the air was crisp and pure. Skilled in war and diplomacy, their empire would one day span from dawn to dusk, governing diverse peoples with equitable laws, constructing roads linking far-flung regions, and fostering trade that enriched their lands. Javan's children, however, roamed furthest, taking to the sea with ease. Their ships ventured beyond the pillars marking the world's edge, discovering islands strewn across the ocean like jewels. They built cities on peninsulas and isles, ever near the water, their harbors bustling with traders from all nations. Javan's heirs bridged the known world and beyond, their philosophers posing unprecedented questions, their poets crafting visions that reshaped thought. They birthed democracy, empowering citizens to shape their laws, erected theaters for timeless tales, sculpted lifelike statues, and held games celebrating human prowess. Their disciplined armies triumphed over larger foes, their colonies dotting distant shores. Tubal and Meshech settled the far north, mastering metals unknown elsewhere. Their craftsmanship drew kings' envoys seeking peerless weapons and tools. In dense forests, they honed unmatched hunting and trapping skills. Tiras led his people to rugged coasts where waves battered cliffs, navigating by stars and mastering the sea's moods, their descendants becoming legendary sea kings. Japheth's expansion was not always peaceful. Encounters with other people sparked alliances through marriage or wars spanning generations. Through conquest, trade, or migration, they filled the world's voids, linking lands with commerce and spreading ideas, fulfilling Noah's promise in ways unimaginable, not merely in numbers but in influence. Yet this growth bore costs. As Japheth's heirs dispersed, they drifted apart, their languages and customs diverging. Some forgot their origins, crafting new gods and tales, erecting monuments to their own glory while neglecting the God who blessed their forefather. Still, the promise endured, Japheth's descendants exploring uncharted oceans and continents, building global empires, and carrying divine knowledge to unknown peoples, preparing the world for its ultimate unity. The curse on Canaan cast a dark pall over Ham's entire line, its judgment lingering like an unrelenting storm. Cush's children built cities along a life-giving river in scorching sands, their monuments testifying to resilience. For centuries, they flourished, but conflict loomed. Shem's heirs, led by Moses, brought plagues upon Mizraim's kingdom, a night of divine judgment claiming the firstborn, marking Egypt's decline as its pyramids became relics of faded glory. In Canaan, the curse manifested differently, as Israelites, claiming divine mandate, toppled city after city. Jericho's fall heralded a civilization's doom, though some cities survived through peace, while Jerusalem resisted until David's time. Philistines, sea-born newcomers, wielded iron and martial prowess, clashing with Israelites for coastal control. Their 5 cities, Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, Gath bred giants like Goliath, yet they fell to David's sling and Samson's might. Phoenicians, taking to the sea, founded colonies across the Mediterranean, their alphabet and purple dye enriching trade. Yet Carthage, their greatest city, succumbed to Rome's relentless wars, its ruins sown with salt. Ham's heirs built great civilizations only to see them crumble, from Egypt to Assyria, Babylon to Persia, each empire eclipsed by the next. Ethiopia's queens and warriors faced divine judgment, and Africa's hidden kingdoms, though advanced, met their trials. The curse, born of Noah's wrath, seemed inescapable, not for Ham's descendants' sins alone, but for prophetic words that shaped history. Yet mercy pierced the judgment. Rahab was spared at Jericho, her name woven into royal lineages. The Queen of Sheba was honored by Solomon. An Ethiopian eunuch embraced the gospel. Ham's line faced relentless trials, their glories dimmed by shame, but redemption glimmered within the curse, as the God who judged also saved. Ancient maps bore cryptic warnings, "Here be dragons," yet the true enigmas lay in peoples who vanished. The Hittites' empire, rivaling Egypt, commanded trade with iron weapons and intricate treaties, only to dissolve abruptly, their cities buried under dust. The Mitanni, with unmatched chariots, ruled riverside lands, then faded, their unique tongue and gods leaving scant traces. Sea peoples, Pele-Set, Jeker, Shikalesh, Denin, wrought havoc, toppling empires, their origins obscured, perhaps refugees or raiders from lost realms. Phoenicians, master mariners, spread their alphabet and culture, yet left few records, known through rivals' accounts. Philistines, possibly Aegean-born, blended diverse influences, their coastal strongholds enduring until conquest. Elamites, bridging east and west, thrived for millennia, only to vanish, their unique language and art surviving in fragments. These lost tribes, Noah's children, built vibrant worlds, their voices now silenced by time, their monuments swallowed by sand. Yet they bore God's image, their lives woven into the saga begun when Noah stepped from the ark. They were more than ancient names, they were links. Links in the great chain of human memory that binds us to our common origin. Their cities may now lie in ruins, their names lost to time, but their legacy continues. Their blood still runs through the veins of people walking the earth today. Their innovations, their tools, their stories, their survival became threads in the fabric of human civilization. Even if their identities faded, their contributions never disappeared. And then came the mythic overlay. The stories told around flickering campfires have a way of growing with each generation. What begins as a simple recollection becomes legend. What starts as history evolves into myth. And the stories of Noah and his sons were no exception. They followed this ancient rhythm, expanding, echoing outward like ripples across the surface of time. In the cradle of civilization, between the Tigris and Euphrates, the Babylonians told their own version of the flood. Their hero was named Utnapishtim. He, too, built a vessel to survive the judgment of the gods. The details shifted, the faces changed, but the heart remained. Divine wrath, human corruption, and salvation through obedience. In Babylonian myth, the flood hero was rewarded not with a homeland, but but with immortality. He dwelled forever on a remote island where the sun rose from the sea. Warriors and kings sought him out, desperate to unlock the secret of eternal life. But the secret always remained just out of reach, like fruit swaying from a branch too high to grasp. In Egypt, the story took a different form. Priests spoke of a golden age when the gods walked among men and ruled with wisdom and justice. But then came chaos. The order was broken, not by water, but by divine sorrow. The tears of the sun god Ra became a flood that swept the earth clean. His grief washed away the wickedness of humanity. Only the righteous survived to rebuild. In Greece, poets sang of Deucalion and Pyrrha, the only two to endure the flood sent by Zeus. They escaped in a wooden chest, a distant echo of Noah's Ark. When the waters receded, they cast stones behind them. The stones transformed into men and women, giving birth to a new age. The Greeks remembered this story with a quiet wisdom, that humankind rose from earth itself, stone and soil, dust and water. We are children of clay and rock, they believed, hard in spirit, yet soft in soul. The Romans, inheriting the Greek myths, recast them with a new lens. Their flood survivor was pragmatic, a builder, a thinker. He didn't just save his family, he preserved civilization itself. He carried seeds and scrolls, maps and tools. He was the founder of order, the bearer of law. He was the builder of tomorrow, not just the survivor of yesterday. Further north, among the Germanic tribes, the tale darkened. The end of the world would not come with rain, but with flame and flood. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. All would burn, all would drown. The gods themselves would fall in the final battle. Chaos would reign, yet from the ashes, a green world would bloom again. Life would endure, hidden in the sheltering branches of the world tree. A man and a woman would survive, waiting for the dawn after destruction. These northern myths were starker, more brutal, yet they, too, carried the echo of renewal, of ending and beginning interwoven. Far to the east, across great mountains and shifting deserts, similar stories echoed in different tongues. In China, it was you who saved the world, not by fleeing the waters, but by mastering them. He dug channels, carved paths for rivers to follow, guiding the floodwaters back into order. In India, the hero was Manu. He preserved the seeds of life in a great boat and waited until the waters receded. He, too, began the world anew. Each culture, shaped by its own fears and values, painted the flood story with different colors. But the pattern remained. Judgment, salvation, renewal. So many civilizations, so many distances, so many centuries, yet so many told the same tale. The similarities were too precise to be coincidence. Scholars would debate. Did they all draw from a single ancient truth, or was this simply the universal human fear of drowning, written into our bones? But the myth did more than remember. It transformed. Each retelling layered in new meanings. Each culture reshaped the story to reflect its understanding of divinity, of justice, of humanity's place beneath the stars. The sons of Noah became more than men. Shem became a sage king, wise and steady, ruler of the East. Ham became a towering figure, a rebellious giant of fire and ambition. Japheth became the explorer of the West, forever reaching toward new shores. Their flaws were forgotten, their destinies magnified. The ark grew from a vessel to a floating world. The flood expanded, from a judgment on men to a cosmic reshaping of heaven and earth. The dove became a divine emissary. The rainbow, no longer just a sign of mercy, became a bridge between realms, between gods and mortals. These additions were not falsehoods. They were truth rendered in symbol, metaphor, language crafted to reach deeper than facts. They spoke to the soul in ways logic never could. The curse of Ham, in time, was reimagined to explain suffering and subjugation. The blessing of Shem became a reason for wealth and dominion. The expansion of Japheth became the moral permission for empire, for exploration, for conquest. In time, myth became servant to power, to politics, to prejudice. And yet, even then, the myths still whispered something truer. They reminded the world, every action has consequence. That divine justice may be slow, but it always arrives. That hope can survive catastrophe. That the end of one age always births another. The stories of Noah and his sons became embedded in the foundation of human consciousness. They found their way into sculpture and song, into law and literature, into religion and memory. They helped people define their place in the cosmos, their purpose, their God. These stories became the mythos of civilization itself. Artists would paint the ark beneath storm-torn skies. Poets would sing of the bird and the branch. Musicians would give rhythm to the flood. Philosophers would debate the justice of the judgment. From the simple narrative of Genesis would come centuries of human imagination. The mythic overlay would not stop growing. Each new culture would layer new meaning. Each generation would return to the tale and see something new in the old. The story of Noah and his sons would endure, steadfast as the mountains and shifting as the sea. And yet, beneath the poetry and the power, beneath the metaphors and the myth-making, a quiet core remained. A truth unshaken by retelling. A flood, a family, a promise, and the world beginning again. Once, the world faced divine judgment for its corruption. Once, a righteous man and his kin were spared from annihilation. Once, humanity received a fresh chance to fulfill its ordained purpose. The myth, though reshaped in its retelling, preserved this sacred memory. In the shadows of towering patriarchs stand women whose names are murmured rather than heralded. The wives of Shem, Ham, and Japheth stepped from the ark alongside their husbands, yet history has dimmed their visages. Without these women, no nations would rise to weave the tale. Shem's wife bore within her the seed of the blessed lineage, her offspring destined to sire peoples who would carry divine knowledge to the world. Her name eludes us. Her thoughts as the floodwaters ebbed remain a mystery. We can only ponder her dreams and dread as she sowed the first seeds in a reborn earth. Ancient whispers, preserved in texts beyond canonical scripture, hint her name was Sedekitbab, daughter of Elakim, a descendant of Methuselah. Some tales laud her wisdom and healing prowess, but these are faint echoes, carried by oral lore rather than etched in stone. Ham's wife faced a divergent fate, mother to nations that would forge mighty empires and craft wonders of antiquity. Yet she also shouldered the curse cast upon her son Canaan. Her descendants fated for both splendor and sorrow, victory and defeat. Apocryphal texts name her Nile Tamiuke, depicting her as radiant, with bronze skin and eyes like deep pools. Some stories suggest her beauty fueled the transgression in Noah's tent, though these may reflect the biases of their tellers more than her truth. Japheth's wife birthed the most far-flung peoples, her children sailing beyond known realms to found colonies on distant coasts, exploring lands unimagined by their kin. Yet she, too, fades into anonymity. Ancient sources call her Adataneses, a woman of the sea, adept at reading stars and storms. Legends paint her as the embodiment of adventure, urging her sons to brave the waves, her spirit driving her lineage to Earth's farthest reaches. Beyond these three stands Noah's wife, mother to all sons, who safeguarded humanity through 40 days and nights of relentless deluge. Yet even her name is seldom recorded. The Book of Jubilees names her Imzara. Other texts offer Barthenos, Heikel, or simply Naamah. This array of names suggests her identity was lost early in the saga's retellings, though her significance endures. She was the first woman of the New World, akin to Eve, the root of all post-flood humanity. Every nation traces its lineage to her, every family tree converging at her womb. What must it have felt like to step into that desolate world? The silence, after months amidst the clamor of penned beasts, must have been profound. The vast emptiness, after the ark's cramped quarters, surely daunting. Once wives and mothers in a familiar world, they became pioneers, tasked with forging homes, customs, and lives anew, raising children ignorant of the drowned past. These women bore more than humanity's future in their bodies. They held the old world's memories in their souls. They recalled life before the flood, sharing tales of its marvels and terrors with their offspring. As culture's custodians, they taught daughters to cook, weave, tend gardens, and herd livestock, passing down songs, stories, and traditions that shaped nascent civilizations. Their challenges were unique. The weight of each precious pregnancy, the duty to raise founders of nations, the awareness that their choices would ripple through ages. The curse on Canaan struck Ham's wife hardest. Her heart likely shattered watching her grandson branded with divine disfavor, knowing her line would face trials spared others, a heavy load to carry. Yet hope sustained them. They had seen God's fidelity in their survival, His mercy in granting a second chance. They trusted His purposes would prevail through adversity. Some traditions hint at tensions among the wives, a year in close confines testing their harmony. Differing destinies for their children may have sparked rivalries post-flood, but their shared salvation united them. Chosen to endure when others perished, they bore the honor and burden of humanity's renewal. Their influence extended beyond their households, their daughters marrying grandsons to bolster genetic diversity, their customs laying civilization's foundations. In societies that muted women's voices, these mothers likely wielded unique authority as links to the pre-flood era, witnesses to divine judgment and grace, and sages for an uncertain future. Their stories merit equal billing with their husbands, their contributions worthy of celebration, not mere consorts, but founding matriarchs of all nations. Behind every great man, they say, stands a woman. Behind Noah's sons stood wives whose names time has eroded. History often overlooks the women who shaped pivotal moments, yet these mothers rebuilt civilization post-deluge. Scripture notes their presence on the ark, surviving the flood, and stepping onto dry land, but their identities and dreams remain veiled. Ancient texts exalt patriarchs' deeds, while the women who bore their heirs and shared their trials fade into obscurity. Jewish lore attempts to bridge this gap, some rabbis naming Shem's wife Sedekitbab, others offering alternate names. Ham's wife appears as Na'el-Tamuke in some texts, Japheth's as Eresiza. These names, weighty with speculation, reflect centuries of yearning to know them. The Book of Jubilees details post-flood marriages, Noah urging his sons to wed within the family to avoid divine wrath, describing ceremonies brimming with hope for new life. But who were these women as individuals? What ran through their minds as the rains began, as they watched kin drown while safe afloat? Did they clash with their husbands or solace one another during the long, shadowed months adrift? Some traditions cast them as flawless helpmates, silent and dutiful. Others suggest richer tales. Ethiopian texts claim they preserved old-world knowledge, songs, recipes, weaving, healing, while their husbands planned cities and divided lands. Picture them cradling newborns, knowing these infants would repopulate the earth, each birth a beacon of hope, yet laden with pressure to sire leaders and prophets. Islamic tradition offers names like Zara for Noah's wife, titling daughters-in-law for virtues, but these feel like later embellishments, not memories. Archaeology suggests ancient women managed households, raised children, and often controlled trade, hinting Noah's daughters-in-law wielded unrecorded influence, perhaps guiding settlement choices or tribal structures. Bearing children to renew humanity was a colossal burden, each pregnancy a lifeline, each loss a cosmic blow. Apocryphal tales attribute gifts. One foresaw the future, another spoke with beasts, a third mastered healing herbs, making them vital to survival. Their bonds, friendship or rivalry, remain unspoken, though human nature suggests both. Ham's wife, witnessing Canaan's curse, likely grappled with anguish, perhaps pleading or consoling, her response lost to time. As their sons dispersed, the wives faced heart-wrenching farewells, knowing distance might sever ties forever. Their influence endured in the cultures their children built. Shem's wife's reverence shaping spiritual traditions, Ham's wife's boldness fueling empires, Japheth's wife's curiosity sparking exploration. Ancient narratives often obscured women's private sway, yet rebuilding demanded their strength and wisdom. Modern efforts to reclaim their stories, though speculative, honor their pivotal roles. These women remind us that behind famed deeds lie unheralded sacrifices, their lost names deserving remembrance. Deep in ancient libraries, scribes preserved an alternate saga in the Book of Jubilees, or Little Genesis, amplifying the biblical tale with vivid, cosmic drama. Penned in the 2nd century BCE, it claims an angel revealed to Moses on Sinai the world's true history, unveiling secrets of Noah's family absent from Scripture. Urgent and fervent, the angel's voice races against time. Jubilees recasts the flood not merely as punishment for sin, but as a grand clash of celestial forces. The flood wasn't merely judgment, it was strategic. It had a specific target, the Nephilim. These were the hybrid offspring of divine beings, angels, and human women, giants who roamed the earth, who tainted it with violence, corruption, and forbidden knowledge. They had filled the world with darkness, and so the flood came to cleanse it. Noah's family was not chosen at random. They were the last uncorrupted bloodline, the final vessel through which pure humanity might endure. They were the last hope for creation itself, and Noah was prepared. The text doesn't simply describe him collecting animals 2 by 2. He also gathers seeds, agricultural tools, and essential knowledge. He saves not only life, but civilization. Among the most important items he carries are tablets, records containing medicine, farming techniques, astronomy, mathematics. All the fundamentals of human advancement preserved for a future that has not yet begun. When the floodwaters recede and the family steps on a dry land, they do not move forward blindly. They perform carefully timed, ritualized ceremonies. Noah constructs altars. He offers sacrifices aligned with heavenly rhythms. An angel explains, these sacred acts bind heaven and earth. They form a covenantal seal, securing divine protection for Noah's descendants. Every gesture matters. Every prayer echoes with cosmic significance. The Book of Jubilees offers a deeper version of the vineyard story. In this telling, Ham doesn't merely stumble upon Noah's exposed body. He mocks his father's state. And more than mockery, his words carry the bitter edge of manipulation. He tells his brothers, not with concern, but with intent to discredit, to undermine, to elevate himself. His dishonor becomes the trigger for cosmic fallout. Jubilees goes further. It tracks generations with incredible detail. It names Noah's daughters-in-law. It describes their marriages, the births of grandsons and great-grandsons. Every birth, every union is dated with precision, down to the year and month. The Earth's division isn't random, it's ritual. As if distributing inheritance according to a heavenly blueprint, Noah draws lots for his sons under divine instruction. Shem is given the center of the world, including what would one day be Jerusalem. Ham receives the territories of the south, spanning across Africa and portions of Asia. Japheth inherits the north and the west, stretching out toward lands still unknown. But not all will honor these boundaries. Jubilees warns that some of Ham's children will grow restless. They will try to claim territory assigned to Shem. And so begins a prophecy of enduring conflict, brother against brother, generation after generation, fueled by ancient trespass and unhealed wounds. Noah's final years are described with remarkable clarity. He does not fade into silence. He continues to receive visions, glimpses of what lies ahead. He writes instructions for his children and their children, laying down warnings about spiritual decay and worldly temptation. He even establishes holy festivals, markers in time, to help them remember who they are and why they were chosen. But perhaps the most vivid element of Jubilees is its depiction of spiritual war. The flood, though cataclysmic, did not end the struggle between good and evil. Some demonic spirits survived and immediately began working to lead humanity astray once more. These dark forces whispered forbidden knowledge to Noah's descendants, secrets not meant to be known. And from this conflict, a new figure rises, Nimrod. Noah's grandson, already noted for his strength, becomes a symbol of rebellion. More than a mighty hunter, Nimrod is cast as a challenger to divine authority, a leader of men, but also a leader of resistance. The Tower of Babel becomes the peak of his revolt, an earthly stairway meant to pierce the heavens. Jubilees even provides astronomical records. The movement of stars, the cycle of planets. These aren't just curiosities. They're tools. The family of Noah uses these celestial signs to measure time, mark seasons, align festivals. They build a calendar that mirrors the architecture of the cosmos. In this worldview, to understand time is to understand God's rhythm. Angels are everywhere in this text. Each nation, descended from Shem, Ham, or Japheth, is assigned a guardian angel. These beings watch, guide, protect, but also hold the authority to judge. They enforce moral order from beyond the veil. Jubilees offers exact timelines for pivotal moments. Births, marriages, deaths. The chronicling is deliberate. Each date reinforces the notion that nothing in history is random. Every chapter of the human story fits into a divine structure. Law and righteousness are not inventions of Moses, they are ancient. Jubilees insist that Noah and his family already knew many of the commandments. They obeyed moral principles long before Sinai. The flood wasn't merely a punishment. It was the result of humanity forsaking these eternal truths. The book closes with Moses receiving these revelations at Mount Sinai. An angel instructs him, write it all down. Record these hidden truths, not for today, but for the generations still to come. The Book of Jubilees does not present itself as myth or interpretation. It claims to be history, divinely revealed, handed down from heaven itself. Modern scholars debate its value. Some call it inspired imagination, ancient fiction expanding biblical ideas. Others believe it preserves echoes of genuine traditions, passed from the dawn of civilization. But most agree, Jubilees reveals how ancient Jews understood their origin story and their cosmic role. It reframes Noah's tale, not as a personal survival narrative, but as the very structure of reality. Why nations exist, why rivalries arise, why righteousness still matters. The story becomes archetype. Noah's death marks the close of a colossal era. He lived 950 years, nearly a millennium. A man who watched the world crumble and then watched it rise again. He saw his sons become patriarchs. He witnessed humanity's rebirth, both its beauty and its violence. The Bible gives only the briefest account of his passing, his age, and little else. But ancient traditions stepped into that silence with vivid detail. They envisioned a final season of preparation. A patriarch who knew his days were numbered. A father gathering his sons and grandsons for one last moment of truth. Noah's final words, according to these sources, were weighty. He reviewed the earth's division, imploring his descendants to honor the boundaries. He warned against mingling with corrupted bloodlines, a lesson painfully etched into their past. He emphasized holiness, obedience, faithfulness to the divine calling. But he focused especially on his grandsons. He saw in them the true test of what humanity would become. Some, he said, would build cities of glory. Others would fall into shadow. He pleaded with them to choose wisely, to remember. Jewish tradition describes his funeral as a moment of rare unity. The family came from every corner of their new world. Differences were set aside. Grievances were silenced. Noah, the man who once saved humanity, would be honored by the very people he had helped preserve. His sons, now leaders in their own right, joined together, if only briefly, to carry him to his rest. For a fleeting moment, the rifts within Noah's family seemed to mend, the shared grief of his passing drawing them together. The site of his burial became hallowed ground, steeped in sacred significance. Some traditions claimed his tomb rested on Mount Ararat, near the Ark's landing, tying him to the place of salvation. Others placed it in the land later called Israel, linking him to a promised holy land. Each site bore profound symbolic weight, reflecting Noah's enduring bond with divine geography. Islamic lore paints a distinct picture of his final days, portraying him as a prophet receiving divine visions until his last breath. His death marked the shift of spiritual guidance to a new generation of leaders, his funeral stretching across days. Envoys from every tribe descended from his sons gathered, offering tributes and recounting the patriarch's wisdom. The ceremony resembled a grand reunion, uniting the scattered human family in reverence. Yet Noah's death unleashed immediate ripples. Without his unifying presence, old wounds reopened, and disputes over territory and authority flared. The curse on Canaan, once tempered by Noah's influence, began to unfold with stark clarity. Shem, the blessed son, assumed the mantle of spiritual leader, but his authority faced resistance. Ham's descendants, still stung by their father's disgrace, pushed for independence, asserting their own paths. Japheth's quieter lineage began westward migrations, seeking their own destinies. Some accounts suggest Noah left written directives for his heirs, prophetic scrolls detailing each family's future and practical counsel on farming, herding, and governance. Following his death, his grandchildren embarked on the first great migrations, no longer bound by the patriarch's call to unity, hastening the spread of civilization across the earth. Nimrod's ascent to power aligned eerily with Noah's passing. Certain texts imply the mighty hunter bided his time. waiting for the patriarch's moral restraint to fade before launching his grand schemes. The Tower of Babel's construction, begun soon after Noah's funeral, was likely no coincidence, a bold defiance of his teachings on humility and obedience, signaling the post-flood generation's first rebellion. While archaeology cannot verify the specifics of Noah's death, ancient burial practices offer context. Great leaders received lavish funerals to honor their deeds and cement their posthumous influence. The emotional toll of his loss varied across the family. His sons mourned their father, the last tether to the pre-flood world. His grandsons grieved their wise grandfather. His great-grandsons lost a mythic figure who defined their sense of divine purpose. Legends speak of wonders at his funeral, angels appearing, flawless weather, and wild beasts paying homage to the man who preserved their kind. Yet the division of Noah's possessions sowed further discord. Who would claim the ark's sacred relics, the tablets of ancient knowledge, or the right to lead family rites? These questions fueled conflicts that echoed through generations. Noah's death marked a shift from a mythic era to a historical one, severing the final link to the antediluvian world and its secrets. His legacy endured through the nations his sons birthed, his teachings on righteousness shaping religious traditions for millennia, his obedience inspiring prophets and leaders. But his absence also unleashed darker urges, as the unity he fostered gave way to rivalry and strife, planting seeds of wars among his descendants' nations in the shadow of his grave. Noah's passing reminds us that even the greatest figures fade, their influence lingering though their presence ends. The world must then choose to uphold their legacy or forge new paths. The ancient world's map reads like a blood-stained family tree, with conflicts echoing Noah's curse. Egyptians clashed with Hittites, Canaanites with Hebrews, Greeks with Persians. Each wore a distant reverberation of a family feud born in a tent near Ararat. Ancient genealogies traced every civilization to Noah's sons, turning battlefield clashes into kin settling ancestral scores. Egyptians, descended from Ham through Mizraim, built marvels along the Nile, pyramids piercing the sky, rock-hewn temples, mummies defying time. Their empire endured millennia, dominating the known world. Yet their might drew them into wars with others, like the Hittites, Ham's descendants through hate, who ruled lands now called Turkey. Their struggle for trade routes and strategic regions, epitomized at Kadesh where Ramesses II faced Mu'tali, saw thousands perish in a day of dust and blood, neither side claiming clear victory. Were these mere political or economic disputes, or did the curse on Ham fuel deeper tensions, blessing his line with greatness but cursing it with discord? Canaanites faced a grimmer fate as Joshua's Israelites invaded their promised land, confronting tribes like the Jebusites in Jerusalem, Philistines on the coast, and Amorites in the mountains, each fighting fiercely for their home. These wars, pitting Ham's cursed descendants against Shem's chosen line, seemed to fulfill Noah's ancient prophecy, with Canaan's children destined to serve their cousins after centuries of bloodshed. Jericho's legendary fall, its walls crumbling after 7 days of marching and trumpets, finds some archaeological corroboration, though details remain elusive. The Philistines, possibly tied to enigmatic sea peoples, resisted longer, their 5 coastal cities spawning giants like Goliath, yet falling to heroes like David and Samson. Meanwhile, Japheth's descendants spread north, with Greeks building Mediterranean city-states, Scythians roaming Central Asian steppes, and Rome's forebears settling Italy. Though seemingly distant from Middle Eastern strife, they were drawn into global conflicts under the Persian Empire, descended from Japheth through Gomer, which united Noah's 3 lines, amplifying ancient family tensions. The Greek-Persian wars at Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis became mythic, pitting small Greek forces against vast Persian armies, clashing not just over land but over visions of society. The Trojan War, sung by Homer, may have been a Japhethite civil war, Greeks and Trojans sharing a common lineage. Babylon and Assyria, blending descendants of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, saw complex conflicts, like Assyria's fall of Israel, cousins warring against cousins. These were not simple moral battles. Each side bore valid claims and noble aims. Egyptians preserved knowledge, Hittites crafted the first peace treaty, Canaanites innovated agriculture and trade, with Phoenicians birthing the alphabet and Mediterranean networks. Yet Ham's curse ensured their triumphs came at great cost, their empires, Egypt, Hittites, Canaanites, falling to conquest or oblivion. New powers and technologies fueled endless wars, each generation learning their foes were kin, their religious divides, Shem's monotheism, Ham's polytheism, Japheth's philosophies, fanning political flames. Ancient observers noted the irony. A family saved by divine grace, blessed for obedience, became a wellspring of war. Noah's curse divided his sons more deeply than imagined. Modern scholars debate whether these genealogical ties were factual or mythic constructs to justify strife, the truth likely blending history and symbolism. Ancient peoples saw their wars as family quarrels, deepening their meaning and hardening peace. As dawn broke over the Jordan, Joshua rallied Israel's tribes on its eastern bank, gazing across to Canaan, home to Noah's cursed grandson's heirs. For centuries after the curse, its fulfillment loomed. Canaan's land, a fertile bridge between Africa and Asia, boasted rivers, protective mountains, and bountiful plains, a land of milk and honey. Its peoples, Hittites in the mountains, Jebusites in Jerusalem, Amorites in the highlands, Canaanites in the valleys, had built cities, customs, and gods. Israel, Shem's line through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, bore divine promises to inherit this land from Egypt's river to the Euphrates, a covenant clashing with the reality of its entrenched inhabitants, no mere nomads but settled, skilled warriors. They were more than just inhabitants of the land. They were established farmers, masterful artisans, and disciplined warriors, living in fortified cities built for defense and endurance. The Book of Numbers recounts the famous scouting mission. 12 men, each one representing a tribe of Israel, were sent to survey the promised land for 40 days. What they brought back stunned the camp. A single cluster of grapes was so massive it had to be carried between two men on a pole. Yet alongside the bounty came ominous warnings. Giants walked the land. The cities were colossal, with walls that seemed to reach into the very heavens, and the people within were far too powerful to conquer through conventional means. Panic swept through the Israelite encampment like wildfire. Of the 12 scouts, only 2, Joshua and Caleb, stood firm in their belief that God would grant them victory. The other 10 allowed fear to consume them, spreading despair and doubt among the people. This collective failure of faith came at a devastating cost. That entire generation, gripped by disbelief, was condemned to perish in the wilderness. Only their children would live to see the inheritance they were promised. What followed was 40 long years of wandering. A new generation was born and raised in the unforgiving expanse of the desert. They were nurtured not on the site of Canaan, but on the stories whispered by firelight, the tales of a land flowing with milk and honey, a homeland they could imagine but had never seen. Even Moses, the leader who had liberated them from Egypt and led them through trials unimaginable, was allowed only a glimpse of that land before his death. He never set foot upon its soil. The mantle of leadership fell to Joshua, who now faced a challenge that was as spiritual as it was military. His mission wasn't simply conquest. It was the fulfillment of a prophecy spoken generations earlier. The ancient words of Noah, his declaration that Canaan would serve his brothers, now loomed large, no longer abstract, but on the brink of battlefield reality. Would that ancient curse prove mightier than the strength of armies? The crossing of the Jordan River marked a decisive moment. Just as the Red Sea had once parted before the first generation of freed slaves, now the Jordan's waters ceased to flow as soon as the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant stepped into its current. The message could not have been clearer. The same divine hand that delivered them from bondage in Egypt would now lead them to victory in Canaan. Jericho was the first city to fall. Its mighty walls crumbled not through siege warfare, but after an eerie procession of silent marching and trumpet blasts, an act of divine choreography. Archaeological evidence indicates that Jericho did indeed fall around this period, though the specifics remain debated by scholars. Still, what remains undisputed is the shock that Jericho's fall sent through the heart of Canaan. The conquest, however, was not as swift or complete as some accounts suggest. The book of Joshua describes rapid military success, But the Book of Judges paints a more nuanced and prolonged struggle. Numerous Canaanite cities held on to their independence for generations. The Philistines established firm control over the coastal plains. The Jebusites, for their part, continued to rule Jerusalem until the reign of King David. Full domination took centuries, not mere years. Some Canaanite communities secured their survival through diplomacy. The Gibeonites, for example, deceived Joshua into believing they came from a distant land, securing a treaty of peace. When their deception was revealed, they were spared, but were bound to perpetual servitude as woodcutters and water-bearers. Another chapter written under the long shadow of the ancient curse. Other groups blended more quietly into Israelite society. Though intermarriage was officially forbidden, the archaeological record suggests that it was likely a common occurrence. Cultural and architectural similarities between Canaanite and early Israelite settlements point toward a gradual assimilation, not a total displacement. The conquest may have been more of a slow transformation than an outright replacement. The Phoenicians, descendants of Canaan's son Sidon, retained their independence by embracing the sea. Rather than compete for land, they built a maritime empire, establishing trade routes and colonies across the Mediterranean, from Cyprus to the coast of Spain. Their ships transported cedar, purple dye, and a revolutionary innovation, the alphabet. They demonstrated that even under a legacy of curse, prosperity was still possible. The religious undertone of the conquest was just as vital as the territorial one. To the Israelites, claiming the land was also about cleansing it, purging it of idolatry and practices they viewed as abhorrent. The Canaanite religion, to Israelite eyes, was steeped in fertility rites, child sacrifice, and the worship of multiple gods. Their conquest was seen as divine judgment upon these sins. But from the Canaanite perspective, theirs was a religion as old as the hills, one in which Baal, the storm god, ruled the rains, and Ashura, the mother goddess, governed fertility. Their sacred sites, their high places and groves, were desecrated by what they saw as foreign invaders. To them, it was not sin being purged but tradition being destroyed. Deuteronomy contains commands that sound harsh to modern sensibilities: complete destruction, no mercy for the Canaanite nations. Yet in the ancient Near East, warfare of total conquest was not abnormal. What was unique in this case was not the scale of violence, but its explicit religious rationale. Some scholars believe these conquest narratives were written centuries later, during the Babylonian exile, to renew faith in divine promises and national identity. Others argue that they preserve authentic echoes of Bronze Age warfare. Most agree that the historical truth likely contains elements of both traditions. Regardless, the story of Canaan's conquest became a foundational model for religion, for politics, for empire. The idea that God grants land to the faithful while punishing the wicked endured across civilizations. Canaanite responses to invasion were as varied as their geography. Some fled to nearby regions. Others dug in and defended their mountain strongholds or coastal ports. Many adapted, slowly merging their customs with Israelite rule while still preserving ancestral threads of identity. Ironically, the curse of Canaan reached its fullest expression under King Solomon. His glorious temple in Jerusalem, an architectural wonder, was constructed, in part, by Canaanite craftsmen pressed into forced labor. The very descendants of the cursed grandson ended up building one of the most sacred structures of the ancient world. Their servitude fulfilled prophecy, but their skill made it possible. And yet, even this golden age sowed seeds of future strife. Along the coast, the Philistines, possibly related to the mysterious sea peoples, rose in power, founding 5 major cities. For generations, they would battle the Israelites, producing legendary clashes like the one between David and Goliath. The conquest had not wiped the slate clean. It had drawn the borders of an unfinished war. For centuries afterward, Israelites and Canaanites lived side by side. Sometimes they cooperated. Other times they clashed. The religious and cultural tensions that conquest was supposed to resolve persisted long into the future. Archaeology today paints a complex picture. Some sites bear scars of destruction. Others tell of slow, shared evolution, layer upon layer of life reshaped, not erased. The debate continues over how well the archaeological record aligns with biblical narrative. But the deeper truth remains. The saga of Canaan and the land promise is not just a tale of prophecy. It is the story of how ancient curses and family destinies shaped the geopolitical and spiritual landscape of the Middle East for more than 1,000 years. In the dimly lit halls of medieval monasteries and the vibrant libraries of the Renaissance, scholars pored over ancient manuscripts, meticulously mapping the lineages of Noah's sons across continents and centuries. They believed these texts held the secret to unraveling the tapestry of human diversity, convinced that every nation, tribe, and people could trace their origins to one of three brothers who descended from the Ark onto Mount Ararat's slopes. The Table of Nations in Genesis 10 served as their sacred guide, a blueprint for humanity's spread. Shem, they declared, fathered the Semites, Hebrews, Arabs, Arameans, and Assyrians. Ham birthed the African peoples, including Egyptians, Ethiopians, and Canaan's varied tribes. Japheth sired the northern and western races, Greeks, Romans, Scythians, and enigmatic tribes dwelling beyond the known world's edge. This straightforward genealogy seemed to answer every question. Why did peoples differ in appearance? They sprang from distinct brothers. Why did they speak myriad tongues? The chaos at Babel had scattered them. Why did they inhabit diverse climates? Each brother had been allotted specific domains in the Earth's division. Medieval thinkers wove intricate theories around these connections, asserting Germanic tribes descended from Japheth's grandson Ashkenaz, Slavic peoples from another Japhethite branch, and Celts and Western Europeans from various sons listed in ancient records. This framework offered solace in a turbulent world, assuring that every stranger, every far-off kingdom, every obscure tribe belonged to a grand, interconnected family tree. No one was truly alien. All were kin, bound by Noah's blood and shared history. Yet this ethnographic legacy bore perilous undertones. If all shared a common origin, why did some wield greater power? Why had certain groups forged mighty civilizations while others remained tribal? Answers often entrenched existing biases and hierarchies. Shem's blessing cast his descendants as divinely chosen for spiritual supremacy. Ham's curse doomed his progeny to servitude, and Japheth's promise of enlargement destined his heirs to claim vast expanses. These ancient pronouncements justified medieval power structures, with European scholars firmly aligning themselves with Japheth's line, viewing their growing dominion as the fulfillment of prophecy. The vow that Japheth would dwell in Shem's tents was read as Christian Europe's divine right to seize the Holy Land, transforming crusades into genealogical imperatives, not mere political campaigns. The age of exploration deepened these theories' complexity. Encountering Native Americans, Europeans scrambled to place them within Noah's lineage, some labeling them remnants of Israel's lost tribes, others consigning them to Ham's cursed line, their perceived primitiveness deemed ancestral punishment. Pacific Islanders, Australian Aborigines, and African tribes posed similar puzzles, prompting scholars to stretch their frameworks, often to validate European superiority and colonial ambitions. The Atlantic slave trade intensified this need, with scholars amplifying Ham's curse to argue Africans were fated for bondage, ignoring its biblical specificity to Canaan. These ideas were no mere academic musings. They shaped laws, fueled wars, and sealed the fates of millions, casting slavery as divine will and native dispossession as righteous judgment. Modern science began to unravel these theories, as studies of languages, cultures, and traits revealed patterns defying the triadic division. Discoveries of human antiquity and evolution offered alternative explanations for diversity, yet the Noahic model clung tenaciously. 19th-century scholars sought to reconcile science with tradition, crafting elaborate theories of racial migrations and cultural diffusion that preserved Noah's sons' roles. Scientific racism breathed new life into old prejudices, with skull measurements and intelligence rankings echoing biblical hierarchies, cloaking bias in objective guise. These ideas culminated horrifically in Nazi ideology, which drew on medieval Noahic interpretations to exalt Germanic Japhethites while condemning Jews, Slavs, and others as inferior, rooted in distorted genealogies. Nazism's defeat discredited extreme ethnographic theories, though subtler forms lingered. Religious groups still leaned on Noah's genealogy to explain diversity, and nationalist movements invoked biblical descent for territorial or cultural claims. Modern genetics, however, reveals a far more intricate ancestry, with shared recent ancestors and African populations showing the greatest diversity, appending notions of a singular cursed lineage. Archaeological evidence paints a complex picture of migrations and cultural growth, defying reduction to three linear paths. Still, Noah's son's legacy persists in modern thought, with some religious and political groups clinging to biblical genealogies to frame diversity or justify policies, a testament to these ideas' enduring sway. The narrative of Noah's sons as a lens for human diversity underscores the power and peril of mythic thinking. These stories offered meaning and unity but fueled oppression when wielded to justify prejudice. They remind us that even scientific theories can mask ancient biases, and progress demands relentless scrutiny of inherited assumptions, no matter how neatly they simplify complex truths. Noah's sons gifted humanity a sense of shared roots, but became instruments of division, epitomized by the misuse of Ham's curse. In Charleston Harbor, a preacher's voice rose over a ship's deck, reading Genesis to enslaved Africans, bewildered and afraid, proclaiming their bondage as God's decree foretold by Noah's curse, a scene repeated across the American South and slaveholding lands. This perversion of Ham's curse, the most warped biblical reading in history, justified millions' enslavement and entire continents' subjugation, turning a family quarrel into a weapon against human dignity. This distortion evolved gradually. Early Christian thinkers rarely tied the curse to African slavery, with figures like Augustine seeing it as a metaphor for sin's bondage or a prophecy of Canaanite subjugation. But as slavery surged in the late medieval era, scholars drew sinister links, positing Ham as Africa's progenitor and his curse as divine sanction for servitude, a twisted logic shielding immoral commerce. The Age of Exploration strengthened this narrative, with Portuguese and Spanish traders exploiting African kingdoms' sophistication, not admiring it, citing Ham's curse to justify subjugation. Protestant regions, emphasizing predestination, embraced this view more readily than Catholic theology, which upheld human dignity. American slavery crafted the most robust defense of this interpretation, with Southern clergy linking African ancestry to Ham, claiming dark skin marked the curse, rendering slavery divinely ordained. Ministers like Josiah Priest, whose 1840s writings sold widely, argued the curse explained African inferiority, denying them the capacity for freedom. Abolitionists countered, noting the curse targeted only Canaan, not Ham's other sons, and that Ham's descendants, like Egyptians, built revered civilizations. Ethiopia's independence, Egypt's grandeur, and Libya's achievements undermined the curse's geographic logic, confined to Middle Eastern Canaanites. Yet pro-slavery theologians dismissed these, concocting theories of the curse's spread or shared moral failings, trapped in circular reasoning where slavery proved the curse and the curse justified slavery. Human greed recast as divine will. This interpretation clashed with Christianity's redemptive ethos, where Christ's sacrifice erased ancestral condemnation, proclaiming equality before God. Economic motives, however, trumped theology, with slavery's profits blinding moral clarity, the curse offering guilt-free participation. Beyond America, it underpinned global colonialism, with Europeans claiming biblical prophecy to rule Africa, missionaries preaching salvation to cursed peoples, and apartheid's Dutch Reformed Church citing racial separation as divine order. 19th-century scientific racism repackaged these biases, claiming biological differences from Ham's curse, until biblical scholars, aided by archaeology and history, debunked racial readings, affirming the curse's narrow Canaanite scope. The civil rights movement, led by scholars like Benjamin Mays and Howard Thurman, exposed Scripture's misuse, while DNA research dismantled racial categories, revealing shared ancestry and African genetic diversity. Yet the curse's legacy lingers, with some religious and political groups upholding modified hierarchies, underscoring the danger of twisting sacred texts for oppression. The millions who endured slavery and colonialism, their resistance proving human dignity's resilience, demand remembrance. Their courage unmasked these lies, warning every generation that religion, economics, and prejudice can wreak havoc when unchecked. urging vigilance and justice to avert future tragedies. In Damascus's Great Mosque, as evening prayers faded, a scholar opened the Quran to Noah's tale, teaching students of the righteous prophet who saved humanity from divine wrath and his sons who bore his legacy. In Islam, Noah is a revered messenger, warning of sin, his Quranic story echoing biblical accounts but enriched with unique nuances, casting him as a spiritual guide whose family spread divine wisdom. The Quran notes Noah's sons without naming them, focusing on their responses to his call. Some joined him in the ark, faithful. One spurned his pleas and drowned, a lesson that faith trumps kinship. Islamic scholars, drawing on Quranic clues and later traditions, adopted the names Shem, Ham, and Japheth, shifting emphasis from tribal lineage to moral and spiritual lessons. The disobedient son's tale, where Noah begs him to board as waters rise, only for him to seek refuge on a mountain and perish, underscores that salvation hinges on personal choice, not prophetic lineage. The flood becomes a spiritual trial, not just a physical rescue, with some kin failing the test. Unlike biblical accounts, Islamic tradition softens the curse episode, viewing Ham's disrespect as a fleeting family rift, not a cosmic condemnation, emphasizing forgiveness and redemption. The Earth's division among Noah's sons prioritizes their spiritual missions, Shem's line, including Arabs, carrying monotheism through Abraham, Moses, and Muhammad. Ham's building African civilizations, Japheth is spreading north. Celebrating diversity as divine creativity, not hierarchy, as the Quran teaches peoples were made to know one another. In Islamic tradition, the ark symbolizes the spiritual journey, a vessel guiding seekers through the tempest of earthly desires. Noah's sons embody diverse human reactions to divine wisdom. Some embrace it wholly, others accept it partially, while some reject it outright. The tale of Nimrod, often linked to Ham's lineage, takes a distinct path in Islamic narratives. Rather than dwelling on his role in the Tower of Babel's defiance, these accounts highlight his clash with Abraham, emphasizing personal choices over inherited destinies. Islamic law forged principles that defied racial hierarchies tied to Noah's curse, asserting equality before Allah, where a person's value hinges on faith and deeds, not ancient bloodlines. The Hadith, preserving Prophet Muhammad's words and actions, bolsters this egalitarianism, with Muhammad denouncing racial superiority, proclaiming that Arabs hold no precedence over others save through righteousness, directly challenging curse-driven ethnic rankings. Medieval Islamic scholars, like Ibn Khaldun, approached inter-people's relations with striking impartiality. While noting genealogical ties to Noah's sons, they prioritized environmental and cultural influences in shaping societies, sidelining ancestral blessings or curses. The Ottoman Empire's governance mirrored this inclusivity, ruling diverse ethnic and religious groups without systemic bias based on supposed Noahic descent, valuing merit and Islamic conversion over lineage. Modern Islamic movements largely adopt anti-racist readings of Noah's story, citing principles of human equality and divine mercy as antidotes to hierarchical genealogies. Noah's sons become emblems of human diversity, not racial division, with some contemporary scholars explicitly denouncing the use of Ham's curse to justify slavery or colonialism, arguing it violates Islam's core tenets of dignity and justice, rooted in the Quran's call for equality and compassion. The Nation of Islam and America crafted distinctive interpretations of Noah's narrative, contesting both Christian and mainstream Islamic views. Though contentious within broader Islam, these teachings show how ancient stories evolved to meet modern needs. Islamic feminist scholars have begun probing the roles of Noah's unnamed wives and daughters, vital in preserving humanity, mirroring efforts in other faiths to reclaim lost female voices. The enduring presence of Noah's story in Islamic culture underscores its relevance to questions of family, faith, and diversity. Mosques worldwide teach of the righteous prophet and his kin, drawing moral insights from their trials during and after the flood. Islam's approach to Noah's sons offers a counterpoint to racial and ethnic superiority, prioritizing spiritual virtues over genealogical ties, fostering unity over division, with the sons as moral guides, not conquerors. Today, in a London genetics lab, scientists scrutinize vibrant DNA maps, tracing migration spanning millennia, unveiling ancestral truths that would stun ancient genealogists who pegged all humanity to 3 brothers on Ararat. Yet elsewhere, in global conference rooms, Shem, Ham, and Japheth's names still echo. Religious leaders wield ancient lineages to frame modern conflicts. Nationalists claim biblical descent to bolster territorial aims, and white supremacists distort old curses into fresh venom. Noah's sons remain strikingly pertinent in our scientific era. The internet has revitalized genealogical speculation, with websites promising biblical ancestry traces and forums debating which nation stemmed from which patriarch. Amateur historians craft intricate charts linking modern states to Noah's divisions, some driven by innocent curiosity, others by sinister motives, as hate groups exploit genealogies to preach racial dominance. Ignoring genetics while clutching medieval bloodline myths. Religious communities often maintain gentler ties to Noah's genealogy, with Christians, Jews, and Muslims identifying as Shem's blessed heirs through Abraham, finding spiritual solace and historical continuity. Yet even these benign links can spark issues in political strife, like Israeli-Palestinian disputes, where both sides claim Shem's lineage but diverge on land rights and divine favor. Lebanese Christians may tie themselves to Canaan's Phoenicians, Turkish nationalists to Japheth's expansionist promise, blending cultural memory with political expediency. The persistence of racialized Noahic thinking alarms, as some groups uphold hierarchies despite science debunking biological race, dressing old biases in new rhetoric. Genetic research obliterates these genealogical myths, revealing shared recent ancestors and African populations' vast diversity, contradicting cursed lineage theories. The Out of Africa model shows humanity's African origins, flipping curse-based narratives. Globalization's mixed populations and DNA tests expose ancestry crossing ethnic lines, rendering pure bloodlines obsolete. Yet some churches persist, teaching Europeans as Japheths, Africans as Hams, and Middle Easterners as Shems, subtly perpetuating biblical hierarchies. Educational efforts counter these, with museums showcasing migration's complexity, teachers explaining genetic unity, and historians tracing racial theories' flawed roots. But facts alone can't uproot myths serving deep psychological needs for identity and meaning. Progressive faiths offer unifying readings of Noah's story, framing blessings and curses as historical moments, not racial fates, and viewing the sons as symbols of human diversity's varied paths. Human rights groups challenge genealogical claims fueling ethnic superiority, documenting their role in modern violence and advocating for dignity across ancestries. Cultural anthropology has transcended Noahic categorizations, recognizing ethnicity's fluid, constructed nature, yet popular media often lags, portraying peoples as distinct by ancient origins, reinforcing outdated views. Social media spreads false genealogical narratives swiftly, demanding vigilant debunking. Genetic genealogy services both aid and hinder, revealing diverse ancestry, but sometimes misread through racial lenses. Noah's Sons' enduring relevance highlights humanity's need for stories explaining existence, a need that can foster unity or division. Their tale can justify oppression or champion justice, the choice ours. Around a flickering campfire, an ancient storyteller concluded Noah's saga, gazing at faces aglow with flame. Children slumbered on mothers' shoulders, elders nodded at familiar verses, youths peered into the fire, pondering its meaning. The tale ended, but its essence lingered. What truly divided when Noah pronounced his final words? Was it mere geography, Shem in the center, Ham in the south, Japheth in the north? Was it racial categories fueling millennia of strife, or divine blessings and curses shaping nations' fates? Or did a deeper rift run through this ancient narrative? Superficially, it was land, ancient maps carving the world among three brothers' heirs, the Mediterranean as Japheth's sea, Africa as Ham's domain, the Middle East as Shem's heartland, borders set by divine decree. Yet geography was never the core issue, as peoples migrated, conquered, and mingled beyond these lines. Japheth's sons sailing far, Ham's empire spanning continents, Shem's kin roaming as nomads or settlers. The true divide was cultural and spiritual, Noah's blessings and curse forging distinct worldviews and survival strategies. Shem gained spiritual vision, his heirs becoming monotheists, bookkeepers, truth-seekers. Ham inherited a zeal for civilization, his children crafting cities, agriculture, and arts, yet shadowed by pride's temptation to favor human feats over divine will. Japheth received expansion and adaptability, his descendants venturing furthest, innovating technologies and ideas, ever probing limits. These weren't genetic traits, but cultural molds, learnable and blendable, shaped by choice and context. The real schism lay in humanity's answers to existence's core questions. how to engage the divine, through Shem's rituals, Ham's achievements, or Japheth's exploration. Each path held wisdom and peril, humanity needing all three, as Shem's insight without Ham's practicality breeds irrelevance. Ham's empires without Shem's ethics turn corrupt, and Japheth's wanderings without roots yield aimlessness. Yet blessings and curses sparked tragic clashes, each tradition deeming itself supreme, Shem's heirs claiming divine exclusivity, Ham's boasting civilizational prowess, Japheth's exalting intellectual and territorial gains. These rivalries fueled history's wars, not from inherent differences, but from belief in each path's uniqueness. The deepest sorrow was forgetting their shared origin, one family, one arc, one divine mercy surviving the flood, their differences mere variations, not alien divides. Modern science echoes this, affirming shared ancestry amid fluid cultural distinctions. All human beings are connected by recent common ancestors. While genetic diversity is real and scientifically evident, it doesn't align with the rigid categories drawn by ancient genealogists. Cultural differences, though powerful and influential, are not etched into our DNA. They are learned, adapted, and passed down through stories, rituals, and experience. They evolve, blend, and shift with time. The story of Noah's sons, then, might not be a justification for rigid division, but rather a parable offering insight into the richness of human diversity. It may be understood as a metaphor suggesting that strong, balanced societies require multiple ways of approaching life's deepest questions. Societies need some who safeguard spiritual traditions, others who excel in material construction and pragmatic problem-solving, and still others who venture into the unknown, exploring new frontiers of thought and geography. The trouble begins when these roles harden into rigid identities, when spiritual people come to disdain the builders, when the practical dismiss the moral, and when explorers sever all roots and view tradition as a burden. When each path believes it is the only valid one, harmony collapses. Conflict replaces cooperation. What if the real message was that the separation of the sons was never meant to become permanent? What if the original design was for these archetypes to balance and support each other, forming a complete picture of what humanity could be? The blessing, then, was meant for all peoples, not just for one favored line. The curse, too, was not meant to be an eternal condemnation, but a cautionary tale, a warning about the cost of arrogance, pride, and disrespect. The flood did not erase humanity's flaws. It merely gave the world a reset. And with that reset, Noah's family carried forward the full spectrum of human potential, for goodness and for corruption, for unity and for division. The behavior of his sons revealed just how swiftly those potentials could take new forms, sparking both renewed cooperation and new forms of conflict. What was truly fractured wasn't land, or language, or tribe. It was human consciousness itself. A unified vision, a shared sense of purpose and meaning that might have once existed before Babel, shattered into fragments. That unity, which could have prevented the flood to begin with, was lost. The sons came to represent a deeper split, the disintegration of human wisdom into three separate and often competing systems. But just because wisdom was fractured doesn't mean it cannot be restored. Fragmentation is not fate. The paths of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the sacred insight, the practical strength, and the intellectual curiosity, can still converge. They can be integrated again, not just across nations, but within individual lives and communities that strive to honor all three legacies. And in our time, the urgency of such integration is greater than ever. Facing global crises like climate change demands not only technological innovation, but deep spiritual commitment to the planet and moral responsibility to future generations. The development of powerful technologies calls for ethical frameworks rooted in ancient wisdom, balanced by the courage to question and evolve. The building of fair and inclusive societies cannot rely solely on structures or systems. It must also draw from the wells of ancestral tradition, visionary thinking, and moral clarity. What was actually divided in the ancient story wasn't merely geography or genealogy. It was the stewardship of human wisdom, divided so that no single people would bear the entire weight. Instead, each lineage, each cultural thread, was entrusted with a portion of the great human task to preserve, to evolve, to carry forward what makes civilization possible. The tragedy emerged not from the division itself, but from the moment the parts began to compete instead of collaborate. When blessing was used to elevate one group over another, rather than to serve one another, it transformed into a curse. The separation became permanent when it was supposed to be transitional, a necessary stage in our development, not the endpoint of our destiny. Maybe the real conclusion is that the story is still unfolding. The sons of Noah are not confined to the ancient pages of Scripture. They live on in us, still striving to learn how to coexist, still searching for the shared rhythms that make harmony possible. They're still discovering how different gifts, spiritual, practical, and intellectual, can work in concert for the sake of a common good. The division of the earth is not yet fully healed. Its reunification depends on peoples who can remember what unites them, a shared origin and a shared destiny. Though the floodwaters have long since receded, the labor of rebuilding continues, generation after generation. Each new age faces the same crossroads: to honor the old divisions or to transcend them, to hoard the blessing or to pass it freely. In the end, the sons of Noah do not represent a closed chapter of ancient history. They embody an ongoing possibility, a living choice we must all make. What was divided wasn't the conclusion, it was only the beginning. The story of three brothers stepping off the ark and placing their feet on solid ground is not just about where humanity came from. It is about how we learn, step by step, era by era, to walk together on a world that was always meant to be shared.